So I know, JR, that we did the first episode, but still would kind of, I think it'd be nice to talk again on, especially being here now, to just hear the backstory of everything, because it's a story, to
Yeah.
put it lightly. And even whenever we first got here, and you're just kind of talking on that event, yeah, I guess if we can just take it back. Growing up in Michigan, did you grow up on a farm, or
Yes.
you did?
Yep. Yep. Uh, like we said, I'll refer to this one time to the previous podcast we did, but my dad, uh, my dad's, I don't know, 10th generation farm, I mean, I'm 11th. It goes back forever. But he was farming, and we were right on the Michigan-Indiana border where my dad grew up and where I was born. And oldest of all the grandkids, and so grandpas were still farming, dad was still farming, he's the oldest kid in his family. So he kind of went out on his own in the mid 70s to start farming. And he grew up on a hog and cattle farm and a small row crop. They're really, you go back into the 60s and the early 70s, there really wasn't row crop farms. You raised your crops to feed your livestock. So everybody pretty much had livestock. And so he'd been around livestock all of his life. And when he was about 14, a neighbor came and said, hey, do you want to come and milk my cows? I got to go away for the weekend. So he milked cows when he was 14 for the first time, and he just fell in love with it. And wanted to always be a dairy farmer after that. So he bought a dairy farm in the late 70s, just before the 80s farm crisis. And then, like they said at the time, if you were the last in, you were the first out. And that was kind of how he did that. And then he started over, and I give him all the credit in the world. He stayed at it, found a farm.
So this was post 80s crisis. He started over.
Well, he started over again in 82. So he lost the farm in 80, kind of bummed around for a little bit, tried to find himself. So he's 28, 29 years old at the time.
How did he lose the farm?
Just that whole 80s scenario, that everything that was going on, without getting into all the dirty details, he had bought the farm at the high price, and with the Russian grain embargo, the push to have get inflation under control, so they were raising interest rates very quickly. That dropped asset values. So suddenly his farm that he had just bought a couple years before had lost about 15% of its value.
So that's what essentially happened for the 80s farm crisis?
Yes.
Because just for the consumers that might not understand all of that, so there was this massive crisis, and it was to get inflation down?
Yes. Well, inflation had caused a huge boom in agriculture starting really in 1971 when we went off the gold standard. And it just was always going to be good. Everybody always thought it was going to be good, and there was just inordinate amounts of money being made for the first time in anybody's life. And as they got into that situation, everybody, the bankers were like, we'll just keep loaning you money because tomorrow is going to be better than today. Well, it was all based on kind of funny money, I want to say. It wasn't the individual farmer that was doing it. It was across the whole economy, because the fiat currency was the currency was devaluing. Inflation is a unique thing because we think of the price going up, but we don't think of the fact that what really is happening is your dollar is buying less.
It's the buying power, yeah.
Yeah, so inflation is a reflection of the buying power of the dollar. But everybody wants to say, well, prices need to come down. Well, what we really should say is the value of our dollar needs to get stronger. And so all that scenario was going on. So land was constantly becoming worth more. And then under Jimmy Carter, actually, he brought in Paul Volcker to be the Fed chairman, and his job was to get inflation under control. The only tool they really had was to raise interest rates, and they raised them very quickly. I mean, 0.5 point at a time every 3 months. And so you bought, and everybody in the 70s basically was on a variable rate mortgage, or any kind of an operating note was variable rate. And so there was maximum exposure to those interest rates hikes that nobody could do anything about, because no bank was going to rewrite your note and let you lock it in when they knew, we don't know when this interest rate hikes are going to stop. So they just kept that process going. Well, it just overwhelmed my dad. So he had a devaluing farm from where his original purchase price was. So now he was underwater on his farm. Commodity prices were starting to tank, and there were some family issues there that, him and his brother were trying to farm together, but that wasn't working out. So there was a little bit of that dynamic. And suddenly, one day, FHA said, nope, that was they call it FSA now, but back then it was called FHA. They said, we're calling your note. You got 90 days to come up with the money to pay us off, or we repossess on you. And of course, at 28, 29 years old, he didn't have access to that kind of capital. So he got the note sometime, I think, in September, and we were moved off the farm by the 1st of December. And we had Christmas at a different place for the first time that I ever remembered that year. So then he took a little while to get his bearings. There was some depression, all the things that go along with that. He went through all those emotions. Our family had all the issues that go along with that. I think that's one of the things that's missed in the discussion of the 80s farm price crisis, was the impact on the families. Didn't matter if it was a boy. I was about 9 years old, 10 years old when that happened. I had friends who were 16 or 17 and, had actually, get ready to get out of high school and thought they were going to farm, and now their parents have lost the farm and they're doing something completely different. And your whole identity is truly changed. You go from living out in the country, having your farm. You could go out into the woods and build a fort. You could go build a fort in your barn. You could, go tear apart your go-kart or your bike in the shop, to now you live in this rental duplex in town, and the lady next door yelling at you for stepping on her yard, So huge social impacts, familial impacts from that. My dad overcame those things, and he said, all I know is how to do is farm. He hadn't gone to college or anything. So he just started looking for a job on a dairy farm. And he found one. There was an older man that had that farm, and he started working there. And that man didn't have anybody that really wanted to take it over. So in a couple of years, Dad went to him with an offer to work on a percentage deal where so much of his paycheck would go towards buying some heifers. He bought some heifers, and then he had a percentage of the dairy herd, and then he had a percentage of the equipment. And he just worked really hard to get back at it, and he was able to buy a farm again and move off that guy's farm. They just couldn't come to an agreement on purchasing the farm. And in 1990, he bought a farm back again, and so we went from there. That was the year I graduated from high school, and I went off to college, and I really had no desire to come back to the farm.
Really?
Yeah, I enjoyed farming, but I had seen my parents struggle.
Yeah.
And I was a fairly smart kid, had a pretty good GPA, and I thought, but I liked farming. I liked agriculture. So I actually went to Michigan State University into an agribusiness program, retail kind of sales, agronomy, and with an emphasis on dairy cattle nutrition. And after my first year there, part of my program was I had to go and intern somewhere. So I went to intern, and on that intern, I realized I didn't really like that part of it. I enjoyed talking to the farmers. I didn't enjoy the cubicle work. I didn't enjoy the daily reports, and this kind of like, here I am an intern, and I'm supposed to be turning out this kind of revenue for you, and I'm trying to figure out and I was just like, I don't think I like doing this. So I came back that fall to my dad and I says, I'm going to stay in college. I'm going to switch my major around. I think I want to farm. And he was like, well, we'll figure out how you can, you know.
Before you had that realization, was your father pushing you to move away from the farm? And
No, no, he wasn't telling me I had to leave. My mom wasn't telling me I had to leave. I didn't really date in high school. I didn't have a girl that was sitting there going, you know, I have a different option. It was just purely me. My mom was not pushing me away from the farm, but she was also like, have you seen how hard your dad and I have struggled?
Yeah.
Maybe you should try at least get out there in the real world and see if there's something better you like. And I just didn't fit in, and I just didn't enjoy that experience. And so I came back that fall. I had about a year and a half left in my program to get through. And I said to him, I says, I want to stay in college. I want to complete and get my degree from MSU, but I want to get started too. And we lived about 45 minutes away from the college campus, so I just started commuting from home. And neighbor down the road, 3 brothers, they were really good dairy farmers, but they were also big crop farmers, and they just wanted to get rid of a few cows. And they just happened to be down talking to my dad and me one day, and one of the brothers said, hey, we're probably going to sell about 25 cows. And I says, well, what do you want for them? And my dad was like, wait a minute. So I made the deal right there with them. And then I went to the bank to get the money. And that was a little harder to come across. But I had that youthful, vim and vigor that was more, no, I don't know how I'm going to make this work, but I'm going to make this work. And we bought those cows. And so we went from my dad milking about 50 cows to us milking about 75, 80 on his farm. And that maxed that farm out. He had bought a smaller farm, pretty run down. I mean, he's coming off of a pretty tough few years there. So he just bought something that needed a lot of work. And we fixed everything on that farm. And a couple years later, I met my wife, and my dad and I were trying to figure out how to make the farm viable for 2 families now. Because I had just gotten out of college, and I'd paid for my college. I didn't have any student debt or anything like that. Had a pickup to my name and 25 cows. And
what year was this?
92. And well, no, that's when I graduated. This would have been in 93 was when my wife and I got engaged.
So this is right whenever I'm coming up to this world.
Yeah.
That's when I was born.
Okay. So so it's ancient history now. But my wife and I were trying to figure out. She's a farm girl from Iowa, so she grew up on a farm. Her parents didn't lose their farm in the 80s, but they came pretty close. So she understood all of the struggles. And I said to my dad, I says, we gotta, if I'm going to farm here, we got to figure out how to do it. It's got to be bigger. It's got to, do all these things. Because I was in this total commodity mindset, having gone through the university system, and I was going to be, that next, guy on the front of all the farm magazines. That was kind of my idea. I had all this knowledge. I had this energy. And my dad was tempering all that with his reality of what he'd been through. So we were a good mix for that time.
So was schooling wanting you to be just like a massive, just big dairy farmer?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every farm we went and toured was 500 cows or 1,000 cows, and we were talking about maximum nutrition to get maximum production. And I can remember the professors who were saying, so that was a time when the immigrant or illegal immigrant, however you want to say it, was just coming into the dairy industry. We really didn't have very many. So at this time, there's about 135,000 dairy farms in the United States. And understand we're at like less than 30,000 now. So huge, vastly larger numbers. The size of the average dairy herd was something around 60 cows then. It's over 300 now. So it's just totally different parameters and a different, not just a different mentality, but different social structure to agriculture at that time. And so we're being progressive. We're understand, we're just like the first classes that are really using computers to do nutrition work, to do soil science work. It had all been by hand before then. I joke with my kids, when I went to college, we had a computer lab because nobody owned their own computer, and you shared a printer with like 12 computers, and they were dot matrix on that goofy computer paper.
Yes.
And they asked my son, I can remember when he was in high school, he says, well, what kind of Windows did you have? I says, I didn't have Windows, it was MS-DOS. I says, we had prompts and we had to do this and we had to, you had to tell everything what it was going to do. You didn't point and click.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, I don't even know what that is. I'm like, yeah, you don't want to know what it is either. Just enjoy where you're at. So we were on that cusp of that technology. We were in classes where they were just talking about the potential for GMO Roundup Ready soybeans. They hadn't been released yet. BST was the biggest thing that was going on. We were discussing how the consumers were rejecting this technology, and of course, I'm indoctrinated. We're all indoctrinated to think that whatever we do is good, and the consumer should just trust us and take it. And that was my first real eye-opening experience with that industrial ag technology partnership.
With the GMO soybeans, besides that, were there other talks on just GMOs as a whole? Or was that the first time?
That was the first we were really just talking about soybeans, because we had one class where we had a guest speaker who really kind of stretched the bounds of where we might end up with this, in terms of like BT corn and Roundup Ready corn, but we just couldn't fathom that. That was just beyond the pale. That was science fiction. We were like, that doesn't sound like, that's not real. You know? So we were really looking at the potential for something like a GMO soybean, and understanding from our perspective at that time, we had very limited chemicals that could kill weeds. I mean, they were out there, but they were very caustic. They were harsh. It was way worse than Roundup, So if you got into Prowl, you got into Sutan Plus, I mean, you were yellow. It just painted you yellow. Your hands were yellow. Your clothes were ruined. It was bad stuff. Treflon, it didn't ever want to mix right. Everything had to just be right, or you were plugging up sprayer nozzles. So it was a totally different thing, and it was an answer to a problem that we were having, but it was an answer to the problem that we should have been fixing. So it fixed this symptom, but it didn't fix this root cancer in agriculture. So we had these really neat discussions. I enjoyed that. I appreciated my education for what I got, understanding that now, 30 some years later, most of it's obsolete and not necessary, but it was good training because it taught me to think. It taught me to listen to other opinions and formulate ideas, and not just emote an answer back to somebody, but actually have a really cognitive discussion with actual articulating logic of why something should be some way or not just, free the whales, I mean, let's come up with a better argument than just your emotions. And so that I'll always be grateful for that through college. But beyond that, I mean, I got a good understanding of how the Chicago Board of Trade works. And of course, the basic soil science stuff that I took then is applicable to be, because it was the building blocks. It was the beginning. But we were really not talking about anything like a biological of any type of fertilizer, or potential of any kind of a, using a pest to control a pest type scenarios. It was all just, this is the chemicals, and we studied chemicals for weeks in those classes, and really held up was his name, Norman Borlaug, the inventor, the father of the Green Revolution from the 60s, studied a lot about him. And now, at the time, he was like a venerated hero. And now I have a totally different idea of who he is. It's like, we should not have done 95% of what he did there.
Can you, as not briefly, but can you just talk on what the Green Revolution was?
It's been a while since I've really got into it, but from my memory, it was, so we had this idea of starvation around the world. And we had the good goal of eliminating that starvation. And
We as America?
yes, and other countries too. But Norman Borlaug, I think he was an Iowa farm boy. He just took it to another level, and he was like, "What we need to do is we need to make it so that everybody can grow wheat." And so he took wheat that was the heritage wheats that I grow now for our flour, and he started to hybridize them and make them. They were still wheat, but they started to lose some of their basic building blocks. So because he was going for total yield instead of total quality, and that was the beginning of what we see in agriculture is yield over quality. It doesn't matter if this corn is good for my cow. There's 200 bushel the acre of it, whereas before I was only getting 130. So bushels equal profit is the thing. So that's what Norman was pushing. If we can just get this out there, it may not be the best quality, it may not have the best nutritional value, but it will have calories and it will have the ability to fill up an empty stomach. And we gave up a lot of just that nutritional grounding that we needed through that. And then you threw in there, he also pushed, he was one of the guys who was pushing better weed control. So he was very, very adamant that we had to have more chemical options. He pushed fertilizer, especially synthetic fertilizers. So he pushed that modern agriculture system of yield, 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 with a perfect intention. I don't denigrate his intention at all of ending world hunger, but he did it through volume and these empty calories.
Well, my whole issue too from the beginning of all of this from America, because that was the 60s and then that led into Earl Butz, but it was just this notion that we have to feed the world, we've got to fix the world, it's up to America. And now, not even 100 years later, we are a net importer of beef, and now most farmers and ranchers can't even make it, and it's just now ass backwards.
Right.
And
yeah,
I don't know, from like a culture standpoint, that always sat wrong with me. It's good to have that as a goal, but now we can't even feed our own damn selves. Most farmers aren't even eating what they're producing.
Right.
And so I just want to add that tidbit, because it's just crazy how long this has been going, but then also what I'm trying to show for the people that do listen is to understand that this is going to take a long time to fix.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just wanted to add that, and you can go back to what you're saying on that.
And you're exactly right. That's 100% right, what you just stated there. What opened my eyes to the harm of what we had done with our ag policy was, while I was at Michigan State University, at that time, it had one of the largest international student populations because it was a major ag college, and people were coming there to learn how to farm. And I had several, when you're in college, at least when I was in college, and I think that was kind of the aura, the atmosphere that I lived in there. You wanted to expand your mind. You wanted to get to know other people outside of your normal clique. Yeah, you had your good friends, the rowdy boys at the farmhouse that we hung out with. Yeah, but you also spent time listening to other people. And so there was 3 people there that I learned a lot from. There was a black kid whose father was an engineer at Ford. He was one of the main engineers on the Ford Mustang from the 70s on. And smart as a whip kid, he was in commodity. He wanted to become a commodity trader. And it was neat to talk to him because he had such a different life experience than I did. And would share stories about our lives, and totally different. And he wasn't a ghetto kid. His dad was one of the main engineers for the Ford Mustang and was worth a lot of money. So he was kind of the rich kid. I was the poor kid. He was the rich kid. And it was neat to pick his brain and to get those experiences. And then two other gentlemen that were there who were in their 30s. So I'm in my late teens, early 20s. They're in their 30s. One was from the Ivory Coast, and I can't remember the name of I can't remember what country the other guy was from now. We're talking 30-some plus years ago now. But both of those gentlemen were sent over here by their governments to learn how to farm so that they could go back and feed their families. So we were having these interesting discussions about Norman Borlaug, about GMOs, potential GMOs at that time, just all these things. And the guy from the Ivory Coast, he says, this is our problem with America. And okay, he's in America, and we're all like, wait, what's going to happen now? And the first Iraq war is going on, so there's a lot of U.S. patriotism, and so all of us farm boys kind of bristle, like, don't.
Yeah, what are you about to say here?
Yeah, don't say anything wrong. And he said, I love America, and he had this kind of he had a French accent as he spoke, so it was really unique. He said, I love America, and I love what Americans do. He says, but if I go over there and I teach my farmers how to farm, but then one day you guys decide that we're not feeding ourselves fast enough, or there's a civil war that breaks out, so you're just going to dump food here, and you're going to decimate our markets, and our farmers aren't going to be able to survive because they won't be able to sell their milk, their food products at a profit, because you're just dropping off free food. So your policy is also one of the things that's killing our markets. And I had never been exposed to that before, that thought. But I couldn't argue with it either, because it's like, well, that makes perfect sense. Why don't you have agriculture? Because when it gets tough and the price gets a little high and there's a little bit of unsteadiness there, government just comes in and drops food and says, we're going to do something.
Sounds vaguely familiar with our farmers.
Exactly. And now 30 years later, the price of eggs gets too high. We'll figure out how to. We won't support getting more farmers growing chickens and producing eggs. Let's go get cheap eggs. Let's bring them over here so we
While we bail out cow Maine and
yeah. So those experiences from that time really opened my eyes to what our farm policy is and what it has done, and how it has gutted rural America. And and so even the discussions that are going on right now about different government programs and a possible incentivizing something for beef cattle or just direct subsidies to grain farmers, it's unique to me because I've always studied ag policy. As we're seeing so many people go, that's not the answer this time. But the forces that be, and the voices that you hear now, you really see who they were always supporting. And it's that next step. It's not the farmer. Farmer's the pass-through. It's the fertilizer company. And I don't mean the guy that you buy the fertilizer for. I mean the international fertilizer companies, the international technology companies, the international manufacturers, and the bankers. And it's like, okay, then who are we really helping here? Because the consumer gets no benefit out of this.
Not at all.
Because that's not going to change their food cost, dramatically one way or the other. And it certainly isn't going to improve their food quality.
So I find this whole, because I am a capitalist at heart, but the whole thing with food and agriculture is the governments always go kind of a socialistic approach, which is why I find it so funny with Trump, how he's all about America first, about American farmers, but it's the same old, and then kind of the culture of what you just described on that story. It's always bailouts, and we just have this socialistic view of it all because it is our food. Like, I kind of understand why we have that. It's our food, it's our lifeblood, but it seems like we only worsen the problems for the farmers and everybody else. I don't know where I'm going with that point. It's just I wanted to bring that up too. It's just I find that so funny how the government's talk on socialism and against it, yet that's their approach to everything when it comes to food.
Yeah. Well, and it has been going back even. It predates even the 1900s. It goes back into the late 1800s, and you start to see when we first got rail transportation from coast to coast. That opened up so many more markets than we'd ever had before so quickly, and it stopped being a local market with a local pricing system, and it became a nationwide pricing system, nationwide market. Then the only variable was what did it cost you for transportation, and so we had that, and we had the monopolies that began to own the railroad, the tycoons, those guys that held that, and then they were able to hold farmers hostage. Hey, I'm the only railroad here. If you want to put your wheat on my railroad, you're going to pay this, and so there was this intrinsic fight between that pure capitalistic mindset that, well, every person should be able to set their own price, but they were devoid of the other side of that capitalistic mindset, which is competition. So we have to always remember that capitalism isn't just about being able to set your price, it's being able to set your price inside a competitive market where you have 3 or more people bidding against something that have their own self-interest at heart instead of the interest of the group. And that is oftentimes missed, and that's why when a strictly libertarian misses that point, because they sit there and go, well, you two consenting adults. Well, two consenting adults is one thing, but in a marketplace, you need more than 2 people to have a fair marketplace. You have to have 3 or 4. You have to have some outriggers in there that say, outlayers in there that say, hey, we can impose demand, or we can impose supply on this. We can add or detract from transportation. And so you go back to the 1870s, the 1890s, and you see this huge battle between rural and urban America, because urban America had become a place where they just wanted cheap food. And rural America was sitting there going like, we need a competitive and fair price. And the railroads promised the masses cheap food because of this new technology of the railroad and ease of transportation and lowering your costs. It doesn't have to sit on a wagon and be hauled by a horse and take breaks. We can just go. We can get it to you. And there was never any real conclusion to that. We broke up the railroads to a certain extent, but they were able to build other buying groups, and farmers tried to band together, and then the railroads said, well, they can't band together because we can't band together. And the courts couldn't just use logic and say these are not the two same entities of things. And you go forward then to 1906, Upton Sinclair writes the Jungle, and he is putting out his version of what's happening in slaughterhouses. And that's the first time we see massive government regulation based on safety imposed on food production. And all that it did was consolidate slaughterhouses then. And we had this continual increase in these. Instead of just sitting there and go, okay, Upton Sinclair brings forward good points. I don't disagree in theory with the issues that he raised of the poor working conditions, the poor treatment of the animals. I disagree with the solution because his thing was get government involved, and my solution was get competition and community involved. Get your neighbors together and demand of this slaughterhouse. I want these are my neighbors that are working here. The second greatest commandment in the Bible is to love your neighbors. So I love my neighbors by demanding that you treat them fairly. And we're here to foster dominion over this creation. These livestock are for a purpose, and yes, it's a great purpose to have a wonderful life of eating grass, and then one day have one bad day where they become something that we can eat because we can't eat grass. They're an excellent harvester of sunlight, soil, and nutrients, and now I can benefit from that grass by eating this meat. But we should show them a little bit of respect and not just treat them so abhorrently.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, we got this food and safety regulation that came down because people didn't want to take responsibility for their food purchases. They wanted somebody else to take responsibility. They didn't want to hold that slaughterhouse in their community accountable. They wanted government to do that so that they didn't have to get their hands dirty and didn't have to show any participation in it. And we ended up, and that just snowballed. And so here we are, what, 119 years after that book was written, and we're still fighting the same fight. And the fight is now we don't have enough slaughterhouses. We have concentration at the top, which was always going to be the end result of that government involvement. And we have less consumer say now than we ever have, but we also have less consumer participation. And as I've moved into the direct consumer market, that's one of the things I preach is you have got to know where your food comes from. You, as you've said many times, shake the hand of your farmer. That requires participation by the consumer that we haven't cultivated.
No, not even close.
Yeah, and if we had, we wouldn't have 4 packers at the top running the beef industry.
Well, and to even add on back to the animal welfare, then you have the quote-unquote factory farming, which obviously everyone now knows about in itself.
Yeah.
And so even that was not even solved.
Right.
And that's only gotten worse.
Yeah, yeah. So again, it comes back to community. It comes back
Yes.
to one neighbor holding another neighbor accountable for the benefit of the community, not for the benefit of a neighbor. You know, and until we get back to that, we're going to keep fighting this.
I don't know, to be honest, that's the thing I think about. I don't know if we're ever going to get back to that because with globalization now and the internet, that's what I think about every single day. It's not even just about how to bring rural communities back, it's just how to bring back community. Mm-hmm. Because it is so freaking hard whenever it's so easy to your roots are so thin or they're not deep at all. Mm-hmm. Because social media makes it very hard for somebody now to plant their roots anywhere because the grass is always greener, or you just hate where you're at, and so the social media makes it much easier. I mean, that's why I always find, this is just kind of a side tangent, I always find it hilarious getting lectured on by older folks on dating. Just like, just stop talking to me. You literally I'm talking to an alien right now because
yeah.
You are just competing with your little local community. You could be born in a town of 500 people and you are going to potentially get messages from across the world. So just stop there.
Yeah.
But you can kind of use that into just the whole globalization of everything. It's just made it very challenging to have any ounce of community. Most younger generations go to bigger cities. And then also use social media as a way to get out of whatever city they're at. I don't know, it's just so freaking hard to really rebuild this to where I don't want to have like the doomer mindset, but I don't know if that is possible. Like I don't know if that's going to happen at all, but just how our society's at now. And then with now we're globalized and social media is so big, then governments, media, they do what they've been doing, and it's just massive distractions. And we're obviously fighting constantly now from the current events that's happened the obvious last couple of weeks with Charlie Kirk and other stuff. It's just, it's nonstop distractions. And so, I had which is why I guess I'll bridge. That's why I say shake the hand that feeds you, is because to me that is the only way of, one, from a consumer understanding how much goes into our food, but two, getting out of the hellhole that is our phone, that's social media, that's online, because it's all just distractions in the end. And to kind of like parse through all of that, it's to get back outside and have these conversations.
Well, after in the events of the last few weeks, I had some young men come to me and they were very frustrated. They wanted to go do something, and I said, stop. I said, you can't do anything. I said, take care of you. I was like, the one young man, good guy, I love him to death, but I said, you're 27 years old, you're fat, you're out of shape, you're unhealthy. What are you going to do? I was like, take care of you. Go impact the people that you can. And we get this idea because of that phone that we can impact people, 1,000 miles away or 500 miles away, or I can feel indignant about this bad thing that happened in this city that I've never visited. And we waste all of our time on that. And I go, what did you do in the community that you live in? And it came back to me in agriculture 2.5 years ago when I started my journey into direct to market. I got so frustrated with what our co-op was doing, and I was like, why are we doing this? And they kept saying it's for our customers. And I finally asked the question. It took me about a year to, formulate this in my head. But I said, who is the customer? And their answer was the other institutions. So it was a Cisco, it was McDonald's, it was Walmart. And I was like, wait a minute. All this time, I thought the customer was the family across the street, the people that live in my small town. But you're telling me the customer is another institution. Well, so I said, so all the feedback that you get is from the institution, and all the institution is concerned about is the forward momentum of that institution. The quality of the product doesn't matter. The delivery of the on-time delivery of it only matters in terms of, did we keep our plant full and all our workers have no downtime? But when I started doing this, I was researching dairy products, I thought, what are the complaints about dairy products? Because I had never heard any. And so I just went online, and I went on Amazon because in big cities, you can order milk through Amazon. Didn't know that. I can't do that, but I was like, well, that's cool. And 2.5 years ago, even, we were just starting to get store pickup at Walmart, where they would pick, you'd call in your grocery order and they would put it together for you. So that was kind of new to me even at that time. Mm-hmm. So I get on and I start reading the reviews, and I remember one page, it was either Amazon or Walmart, I don't remember exactly, but it was one of those two companies, and there was 5,000 comments, or over 5,000 comments. And like the majority of them was, why is your milk spoiled when I go to pick it up? Or why is it going to expire in 2 days from when I pick it up? And I thought to myself, well, they pick up milk every day here. Every other day, actually. I says, and I know where it goes. How can they not have fresh milk in the store? And so I just started to research that, and I realized there's all of these, and I understand some of that was due to COVID and the supply chain issues and stuff. I'll give them a little bit of grace for that. But it was this continual thing, and I thought, well, I can do better than that. I can provide really fresh, really high quality milk to a consumer. I don't know why. I thought that's what I was doing. But what I was doing was I was supplying an institution, and that institution was supplying an institution, and that institution was supplying a distributor, and then the distributor was supplying a retailer. And I realized, and this goes through all of the things that we find in agriculture, the end consumer is not viewed as the customer. They're just viewed as the piggy bank. And they're just at the end, and they're like, I'm going to force feed convenience to you. I'm going to force feed this processing to you. I'm going to tell you how great it is because you don't have to store it. It's going to be always here for you. And don't ever ask me about the caloric nutrient density of it. Just eat it. You'll be full. Well, you won't be full. You'll be hungry again in 10 minutes after you eat it because it doesn't satisfy your body's nutritional needs. And I got to that, and I just realized, wait a minute, we have become the Borg, where we're just feeding the hive, and the individual doesn't matter. And I wanted to get to where the individual mattered, and the cow mattered, and the grass that grew and I realized none of that stuff matters in today's agriculture. It's just the output at the end and the ability to move it to the next institution in bulk as cheaply as possible as quickly as possible.
So this was your wake up moment of wanting to go from conventional dairy to raw dairy?
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm. Interesting. So that's interesting because you're just kind of mentioning the whole out of sight, out of mind aspect in a way, and I've never really thought about that for the farmers. Because for consumers, I've said this a lot. Because I myself am probably so you have your 10th or 11th generation, and you know there's a lot of 5th, 6th generation farmers, but there's also a lot of 5th, 6th generation removed from farming, and I'm probably there. And so it makes a lot of sense why consumers don't really think about any of this, because if you've never met a farmer and bought everything from your grocery store your whole life, it's all out of sight, out of mind. But on the flip side, for dairy, as you just mentioned, that makes so much sense too. They don't, the end consumer is not me, or their customer is not me, and
right.
so they are out of sight, out of mind too.
Yeah.
And so with their practices and everything, you're not thinking about what your wake up moment is.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting.
Yeah, and most, and when you start to do things like I have direct to consumer, you get pushback from traditional ag, because they're like, you're almost like you're sharing your secrets. You know, it's like you just opened up the playbook to everybody, and how do you justify what you're doing? And I have come to realize I don't have to justify it; I have to explain it, because I'm not doing anything wrong, so I don't have anything to justify, for one. But I also have a group of people that have no understanding. So as we got started and we get going, I'm all excited. Consumers are going to start to buy from me. I'm pumped. It's like for the first time in my, I was 50 years old when we started doing that, you know, and I'd wanted to farm my whole life. I had had times of euphoria before, but I was euphoric about selling milk directly to a customer, because I was like, I'm going to put this product out here. I'm going to get immediate feedback.
What year is this?
This would have been 2023.
2023. Okay.
Yep. So we sold our first direct-to-consumer milk in July of 2023. We were slightly delayed because of the tornado that happened in May of 2023 when we wanted to start to deliver, but we didn't have any power. We didn't have any way to milk cows through the tornado, so we had to put our plans on pause for just a little bit.
Can you explain that? Because that was the first thing you mentioned whenever we first got here.
Yeah. Yeah, so May 6th, 2023, we were out visiting our middle son and his family in Manhattan, Kansas, where they lived. And we were driving back and Highway 36 is just a few miles south of our farm, and we're driving back, and I had convinced my oldest son and my youngest son to take care of chores for us, and they had agreed to do that. And so it kind of been a wet spring. We hadn't planted any crops yet, so we were kind of in the middle of a lot of things. And I said, you just do chores, we'll be good. And he was like, all right, we can do that. So they did that, and we're driving back on a Saturday night, and my boys called me. We're about an hour away from home. Hey, there's a tornado watch. Oh, okay, well, don't do anything stupid, you know, just been lots of them, whatever. And about a half an hour later, they call me up and they said, that's getting kind of bad. I think we're going to put all the pickups in the shop, in the shed. Yeah, you know, might get hail. That's happened before. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And about 20 minutes after that, they called me again, and I'm a few minutes away from home still. We're going to the basement because it's here. And I was like, what? And so my wife pulled up her phone real quick because I'm driving, and she's like, yeah, there's a tornado just to the east of us there, and or just to the west of us traveling east. And I was like, how close? And she says, well, it just hit Linnaeus, which is a mile and a half away from our farm. And Reed Taylor, the guy that goes around and checks or does storm chases or something?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, he's big. I think that's his name. He set up his little vehicle just on the road, just out here, and anchored it down in the ground to watch the tornado come by. And so we were getting live feeds of what happened on the other side of the town. And I was like, oh, this is bad. We get home, and I called my son, and he was like, yeah, it's past us. We're just waiting to get out of the basement. And I says, what do you mean waiting? He says, well, somebody's got to get the barn off the door. I was like, oh, okay. I said, we'll be there in 15 minutes. And so I'm just cruising to get here, dodging trees because all the roads around here were plugged up with trees, and some houses in town, small debris was sitting in the roads, and we were driving up people's yards to get around it because I was going to get home to make sure my kids were okay first. And the neighbors had come over, and the west side of our house had gotten pelted by our chicken coop, and one of the part of the roof was laying against the door into our house, so the kids couldn't get out that door. And we got here just as they were pulling. The neighbor came over. There was a 4-wheeler and was pulling it off the porch, and so the boys just walked out as we got here. But we had to park on the road. We could not drive in because there was so much debris in the driveway. And it's about 9 o'clock at night. We couldn't really see everything because it was just pitch black after that storm had gone through, and no power. All the power lines have been ripped out at our farm. And so I just started with the flashlight going around, and I didn't have any dead animals. I couldn't find them all, but I couldn't find any dead animals. You know, all the barns had been picked up and moved, but cattle were running everywhere. Pigs were running everywhere. We were just like, and we had no place to put them. So we just,
Can you explain just like all the sheer, because you're just, a lot of buildings got moved and just wiped
Oh, yeah,
out. Can
yeah.
you just explain that too, everything?
Well, our machine shed where we stored our equipment, and then there was a lean-to on it that had our bred heifers in it, and then we had another building up about 150 yards south of that building that we kept younger age heifers in. Between those two pens, there was about 70 head of cattle, and they were just walking everywhere because the buildings had been destroyed, and so there was fence there and corrals to keep them in, but there was no building to keep them in, so they didn't know what to do, so they were just walking out. Part of that 80 by 150 building had been picked up and stuck between our freestall barn and our milking barn, so we couldn't even get cattle in to milk them even if we'd had power. We had to let all the cattle out. Our feed bunk had gotten destroyed. We let all the cattle out into a pasture and just hoped they didn't run away because we just didn't have anywhere else to go, and our water wasn't working. So we had ponds out there they could get water from, and so we just kind of herded everything in a general safe direction to the corner of the farm. And I said to my wife and those two boys, I says, hey, we'll just hope they're all here in the morning. We'll wait till daylight. I can remember being very exhausted and just sitting down in my office chair and falling asleep in little fits. And then finally daylight came, and I'd been outside for an hour and a half already, and I could start to see as dawn came on just the scope of everything. And
What were you feeling like?
Oh.
Or like, what was the emotions there?
I was concerned, like the immediate concerns of like, okay, my shop has been destroyed. I have no hand tools. I couldn't even find a hammer like to pull a nail out of something to move it. I was like, I don't know what to do. My chains were all gone. Like, okay, my loader tractor is here. I could pull something, but I got to find my chains. So I was disoriented and lost in that. And then I was also at the same time, I was very concerned with like, what's the next step? You get faced with that and you go like, okay, everything around me has to be done. So I had to really just make myself go, the most important thing is the cattle, the livestock. Because my family was already taken care of. I knew they were okay. What do I got to do for livestock? So we just worked around getting livestock taken care of. And then the emergency services people started to show up, and they were like, just checking, our well-being and that type of stuff. And about 10 o'clock that morning, it was a Sunday morning, we called and let our church members know, hey, we're not coming to church because this happened. And we weren't expecting anybody to show up, but like half of our church showed up and started just picking stuff up. And that was a feeling of relief and joy because it was like, okay, I don't have to do every little thing. but it was also overwhelming because now everybody's coming to you. What do I do about this? What do I do about that? And I, some of the guys, I was like, I have no freaking idea what to do. I just you handle it. Whatever you do will be okay. If that pile of stuff is in a more consolidated pile, great. You know, I don't care. It doesn't have to be perfect. Let's figure it out. And boarded up windows on the house and started working so that we could get cattle in to be milked once the power came back. And then I do remember about 11 o'clock in that morning, my boys and my wife were standing and we were looking at the cattle, and that's when it really hit me. And I'm not a crier, but I started bawling. I was like, what do I do? You know, and we were like, I had been fighting with my co-op about all these different issues, and I was kind of out of fight. And so there was a part of me that was just like, I mean, I was really like, call the auctioneer, haul everything off, and just say we had a good run and we'll be done. There was that part of me. And
what helped you shut that down and kept going?
well, to be real honest with you, the livestock, it was just, okay, we can't do any of that this week. So I've got to take care of these livestock. I've got to get pens built. I've got to do this. So now you're just into, so then you start to see, okay, I've overcome this hurdle. I've overcome this hurdle. The insurance man came out and he was like, okay, this is what we can start to help you with on your livestock and your machinery. And it was like, okay. For example, my big tractor at the time, we were rebuilding the motor in it. I had that in my shop. Everything that was, all the parts to that tractor, I mean, I was in the middle, I hadn't put the block back together. All those parts were scattered over 160 acres. And I was like, I'd paid for them all. I had to wait to get them ordered and get them in. And now I was like, and I didn't even have a building. I didn't even have the tools to do it with, you know? So I was like, I can't even plant a crop because my big tractor's down. So now the insurance guys go, well, this is what we can do to help here. And this is what we can do to help there. So there was like a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel.
Was insurance actually helping? Because you always, you know, from just being a person, thinking about in moments of disasters like that, how much does insurance actually help?
It helped. It wasn't near as much as I thought it was going to be.
See, that's what I'm always afraid of, is
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So, without getting into all the particulars, we really figured we were about $50,000 to $60,000 that we just couldn't come together on, where they considered a loss and what we considered a loss, and then the real cost value of replacing things.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it was just like, it costs this much now. Well, this was your original purchase price. Yeah, but I got to replace it. Well, we'll pay this much of the replacement. Well, you do that on enough things, and finally you're sitting there going, well, I don't have enough money to overcome all of that. So it was an eye-opening experience. It made me really go through and go, okay, I have to have a better handle on this stuff for insurance. And I realized that insurance is really there for your bank and not for you. It's to make sure whoever the lien holder is whole, not so much the person who is damaged. Yeah. And so, and I say that I was extremely, I mean, any amount of help was helpful. So we got the help we needed. I had to change some plans about what we were going to do once I realized what the total value was. And we came up with that value pretty quickly within about 6 weeks. So we didn't drag that out very far, but it was not, we didn't come out whole from it afterwards. But like I said, we didn't lose any livestock. It was mostly just equipment and tools and then the buildings. And
this was right before you were about to start with the raw dairy.
With the raw dairy stuff, yeah. So we in fact, we had planned on our inaugural sales was going to be May 31st or Memorial Day. I think it was May 31st that year. Kind of have a little, come out to the farm, meet your farmer, And we didn't do that because our farm looked like a tornado had gone through it. We didn't
Yeah.
want people coming out and seeing it like this condition. And we didn't know, were we going to have all the cattle actually corralled, and were they going to stay in if we did get them corralled?
Yeah.
And so we just, we just had to really fly by the seat of our pants to get that initial sales going. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna see if this makes sense on the flow, because I'm gonna, before continuing on with the raw dairy, and then just to where we're at in current day, going back to whenever you were doing it the conventional model, and kind of going back to with your father too, because mentioning in '92, you know, you both were trying to figure out, all right, now you're trying to support both families. How did you just continue on in that route, going back to that?
We so we had a plan initially. I was going to be, we had about 6 months to think about it, because my wife and I got engaged, but we weren't going to get married until early summer. And I was still living at home. So we were like, do we want to put a trailer on the farm? Do I want to go rent a place in town? All of those things were being discussed. And your family farm, you know, whatever I did impacted Dad. So if I'm living in town 6 miles away, I can't be there. Hey, the cows are out. Hurry up and get here. You know. So we were like trying to figure all that out. And my dad went to a meeting, or somehow he got a hold of. He was contacted by a realtor at a meeting of some sort that he had known for years, and he was like, "Hey, Jeff, I got a farm for sale. I don't know if you're interested in this or not." And Dad was kind of like, "I don't know." And so he came back and he told me, he says, you know, Delbert's got a farm for sale. I said, "Oh, okay, good, whatever." And neither one of us really thought about it. And then the next week, my dad goes, he just said, I'm going to be gone for a little while. And he went and he looked at this farm. And it had 2 houses on it. It had a bigger milking parlor, more barns. It was about 25 miles away from where we lived. And again, Dad had bought that farm just a few years before, but it had appreciated a little bit in value, so he had a little more equity than what he started with. And he came back and he got me, and he says, "Tomorrow I'm going to go show you where the farm we're going to buy." I was like, "Whatever, Dad, fine." You know, I just thought he was pulling my leg. And we took off and we looked at this farm, and I was like, "Well, this is doable. We could do this." Again, another rundown farm that had been rented for years, and the renters had really never taken good care of it. Small fields, and we met the owners, who were 2 older ladies, and they just fell in love with us, and we were able to make a really good deal. And so it just worked.
Yep.
It just flowed. So we went from milking 80 cows. So then we had a bigger farm, bigger facilities. I had a little money from some other work that I had been doing. So I bought part of the farm, but Dad bought more cattle, more machinery. So we owned the land on a 50-50 deal, but he owned more cattle than I did. And so then we had a house for me and my wife to move into, an older house that we remodeled and did all the things that new couples do, and do all this, spend the money that you shouldn't spend and all that stuff. And really loved that place. And so we bought that in '94, and we just started growing that. And in 2001, some land near us got sold to a developer to build in a trailer park. And I'm 29 going on 30, and I'm looking at that going, well, I can't farm here the rest of my life with a 4,000 unit trailer park a mile away. And we had been thinking about building another barn, going to 400 cows. I mean, we had plans.
Was this in Missouri, or where was this?
This was in Michigan.
Michigan?
This was in Michigan. And that urban encroachment just kind of set me up, and I was like, I don't want to spend $1 million to be sued by somebody because they don't like the smell of the cows. And they were downwind of us. They were always going to smell the cows, you know. So we just made a decision through some family things that we were going to split up. And
That's what I want to ask too, because you said you're 50-50, but how was that from a relation standpoint with your father? Because especially from his perspective, I was wondering if he ever pulled on, well, I'm the father, even though it's 50-50.
yeah.
I didn't know if there was any of that going on, or what was that like?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. There was always that. I mean, he ran the checkbook. If you know, most family farms, they'll say they're 50-50, and then dad will give the son, you get to run this over here, you know, this small part over here. So I got to pick out all of the different varieties of corn that we were going to plant, and I kind of did the nutritional, plant nutrition and plant protection stuff. So I had my name was on the debt, but if there was an impasse of something, and my dad and I got along really well for the most part, so there wasn't too often, but every once in a while it would be like, no boy, we're going to do it my way.
Yeah, that's what I figured. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's-
Yeah.
I feel like that's hard to avoid.
Yeah, it is. It is. And it was difficult, especially, so I'm about to turn 30. I'm kind of out of that, you know, the wet behind the ears, snot-nosed kid mode. I'm a dad with 2 kids. I know things, you know, and so there was beginning to be a little bit of tension there, and maybe I was looking for an excuse to get out, but that was beginning of an excuse. I mean, it was a legitimate concern to have this big trailer park going in, and
Right.
and we were looking at spending, you know, several $100,000 to expand the farm, and Dad was not good with managing employees. I was the guy that managed the employees, so I knew that any of the expansion that we would have would require me to be more of a people manager than a farm manager.
Right.
And I was struggling with that a little bit. I didn't really know if I wanted to go in that direction. So we were having a little bit of that tension. That was happening. We had an offer from a realtor to buy our farm for a lot of money. And I was like, this is an offer too good to pass up. So going back to 2001, 2002, you know, we were looking at land that was going to be $10,000 an acre, which sounds low now, but at the time was an astronomical figure.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I says, I think we should bail. And it came down to the fact that my mom didn't want to, because my sister lived around the corner and her kids were there, and us leaving and farming in a different place meant leaving her daughter and you know, and her husband and the grandbabies. And we had some really difficult discussions. Loved my parents and respected them, but we were just going in 2 different places.
Yeah.
And I felt like I needed to go the place I needed to go. And so then we began to talk about how to break up a farm partnership. And when we had begun, we had hired a lawyer and written up a plan for how to, if something happened. So if mom and dad got divorced, it was going to protect me. If I got divorced, it was going to protect them. You know, all of those different contingencies. But we really hadn't thought about a contingency where we just wanted to dissolve the partnership and do something different. And so I still wanted to farm, so I wanted to take my machinery with me, and, you know, basically, I didn't really want to go milk cows again. I was kind of burned out with it a little bit at that time. But we had some really intense conversations, I'll put it that way, about how this was all going to go out. And finally...
Was it a lot of shouting and name calling?
No, we didn't really shout and name call, but there was a lot of history brought up. I did this for you.
Yeah.
You don't seem to be very grateful for this.
Right.
But I would throw back, well, I worked like a dog from the time I was 14 on so that Dad could have a dairy farm again. It should own some, you know.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of that. There was a lot of history brought up. You know, Mom had her own business, and she would say, well, you know, I put money into the farm that I never got back, and you know, just those types of things. But no, we didn't. I don't think we ever became really disrespectful of one another, but we became very territorial of where we were, where the ground we staked out. And what actually happened was, in our discussion about potentially buying another farm, it was going to actually be in Minnesota. We were looking at a farm in Minnesota. We were going to really pick up and move. My wife and I went and looked at the farm, made an offer on the farm, had the deal done. It just required, it was all contingent on selling our farm, basically back in Michigan. And when we left on this trip, it took us about a week to do the trip and meet all these people and get a milk co-op interested in buying our milk, all the stuff that we had to do. On our way back, we stopped because my wife is from Iowa. We met in college. She came to college out there in Michigan, and that's how she and I met.
That's fun. Wait, so she was in agriculture but didn't stay in Iowa?
No, because she was a musician and she was studying psychology.
Okay, I see.
So she was not. She actually didn't want to marry a farmer. She didn't want to get back into agriculture at all. So she was
Prince Charming over here.
Yeah. So I did a lot of persuasion. But on our way back, we stopped to see my wife's grandpa because we were close, and you know, he's getting up in years, so you take every opportunity to stop and see him. And he asked me what was going on, and I told him we're thinking about buying this farm in Minnesota. And he said to me, he says, well, if something happens and if it falls through, let me know. Let's talk. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't think anything of it. Well, we get home, and Mom has had this intense change of heart. She does not want to sell. And we just went through about 3 weeks of hell, emotional hell, because I now have to call a realtor in Minnesota and say the deal is off. We can't, you know, I had put a lot of time and effort into getting that put together. I says, we can't do that now. I got to figure out where we're going from here. So I'm a little bit distraught. My wife is really distraught because she was excited because we're going to be now just a few hours away from home instead of 12 hours away from home. And so we just had this come to Jesus meeting one day. My dad and I did out milking cows, and I says, while we still all like each other, let's split up. And and he said, so my dad and I are only 19 years apart. When we were farming together, everybody called us the Burdick brothers because the neighbor, he said, I like calling you guys the Burdick brothers because it makes your dad feel young and it makes you feel old. And so we always that's what everybody calls us, the Burdick brothers. And again, we had a great relationship and did things well. This was just one of those times where we didn't have the same vision. And so I said, to make this work out, I said, you just make me an offer and I'll leave. And didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't stay there. And went home and told my wife what he and I had worked out in the barn. We had to do that away from our wives so that there wasn't a lot of emotion involved in it. And just man to man, it's us, let's figure this out. And again, no yelling, no cussing, no swearing, no calling each other's names, just two men going, we're divergent, let's part as friends. And I was like, okay. So he made me an offer that I felt a little insulting, but I was also like, I could see where he's coming from because he wants to keep his farm and I don't want to break up his farm. So we were trying to figure out what we were going to do. And 2 nights later, my wife's grandpa calls me, and he owned 180 acres in Franklin County, Iowa, and nobody wanted to come back and farm it. And he says, do you want to come and farm my farm? So, you know, God worked it all out. And we were able to move out there. We planted our first crop in spring of 2002 in Franklin County, Iowa. And I worked at a local manufacturer and we just kind of went along. I I farmed that farm that first year with Grandpa. He just wanted to, he didn't want to quite give it up yet, you know, even though he's 77 years old or whatever he was at the time. He didn't quite want to give it up. The next year I rented it from him completely, and then the third year I bought it from him. And so we just kind of worked our way. So it all worked out, and my dad and I are still, I talked to him this morning on the phone. You know, my mom's been dead now for seven, almost 8 years. So, but my wife, she died of cancer very, very rapid. From the time she was diagnosed in April, she was passed in July. So it was very, very fast.
Your wife or your mom?
My mom, yeah. And my wife took care of her the whole time.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
What's so interesting about agriculture is just unique. It's very unique from like a family standpoint too, because I'm trying to figure out how I can go about this, because just how you described it, it's so challenging to, one, just make it as the farm, but to continue the farm, to pass down from generation to generation, because from like your father, he has his own, what he wants to do the farm because he started it all, but then you are your own person, and your father, I'm assuming, viewed that too, to where he wants to respect that, but then also you're wanting to do your own thing, and having just split apart. It's just so, this is why I do all this, because each story's so different, but all the love for actual farming and producing food and stewarding the land, it's just, that's why I find it so uniquely challenging with agriculture. It's trying to make it, but then also trying to make it to the next generation so freaking hard, because of just how we are as human beings too. It's, but then as the 77-year-old grandpa not wanting to give it up for that first year, and I totally understand that. But then also he's trying to find somebody to take it on, because that it's just, I don't know. I don't see that anywhere in any other industry but agriculture.
Yeah. Well, because there is an intrinsic connection between man and soil, you know, and I think this is one of the things that we lose in our modern agriculture. We've all been to a funeral, and we've all heard the Bible phrase, you know, from dust to dust, and the Bible story of how God created Adam from the dust. And I really take those as literal things, and I think that one of the things that we've done is we've cheapened life, and because we've cheapened life, we've cheapened soil, because soil is the beginning of life, and farms are tied to the soil, especially in the past. They're less now, because we have more investors that own the land, and they're just looking for a 5% return, and they're looking for the farmer that's got the newest, flashiest equipment that'll do, you know, get me the best yield so that I can have the best insurance guarantee, and so we've lost that in our modern system. But you talk to any farmer, and he can walk around and he go, I can remember what happened here. I can remember what happened there. And you're tied to that soil, and your identity becomes so engrafted in that, and you have fought so hard, weather and markets and finances and government, and you know, and this is where you made your stand. You know, if you're a lawyer and you talk about the fights that you had, your fights are all in a courtroom somewhere else. They're in a boardroom at another place, and that was where you were fighting at. If you're a farmer, the fight is always outside your door. It's right here, and so you get it. Whatever you fight for, you love the most, and so we fight that. We fight in agriculture for that, because that's what we've been conditioned to do in the last 75 years. Previous to that, what you were doing was you were fighting for a place for your family, and you had a long-term. You had those previous generations. They had a generational view. I want to clear this land. I want to get rid of those trees. so my kids don't have to clear this land and get rid of that tree. And so when you got to the point where you couldn't do that anymore, you were happy to have your kids come along and do it. And you saw that handoff, and you wanted to be part of that handoff. You wanted to be the guy that said, "This is my son. See what I've built, build better." But what we have moved to in agriculture now is, see what I have built. Oh, I'm going to keep it and I'm going to build more on it. I don't want this to be the foundation. I want this to be the castle. And that has been driven by our ag policy, by the continual increase in the asset values of land that is not normal. You go back to the 1600s and you look through deeds in Europe, it's kind of the land for 200 years never increased in value because it had a utility value, and it was, Wallace so and so. I was looking at one deed. Wallace so and so gave it to Wallace the second. Wallace the second gave it to Wallace the fourth, and it just was Wallace for 200 years, and the price was always this many sheep, this many cattle. When it was just bartered, and then there towards the end there was actual monetary value put to those things, and but it didn't really change. There was no asset appreciation. It was, so you weren't holding on to this as an investment for monetary gain. You were holding on to it for a place for your people, and our change in agriculture policy has completely obliterated that idea, and then also the advancement of technology where somebody who is in their 70s can keep on farming, and you're not walking behind two oxen trying to keep a plow in the ground. Now you're not milking cows by hand. You're actually doing the labor in a climate controlled tractor, and that steers itself, and all you got to do is make sure it gets back around on the end row where it's supposed to. So technology has changed that, allowed for that average age of our farmer to increase because older farmers can still do it. So like with my wife's grandpa, we bought the farm from him, but he still wanted to drive tractor. He still wanted to do some things. And I let him for about 2 more years. And then one fall, I had bought a new combine. It wasn't the combine that he had. I had updated some of his equipment. I had rented some other ground. So he never wanted to go on the rented ground. He just wanted to stay on the farm that I bought from him. And we were combining beans. Nice day like today, kind of warmish in the afternoon, but cool in the morning and cool at night. And it was about 6 o'clock, and I was like, it's been a long day. He'd been running the combine all day. I'd been hauling wagons and dumping beans in the bin. And I says, Christy's got supper. Why don't we call it a day? Oh, I want to go a little longer, he said. I said, Grandpa, I don't think you should. And he's like 81 now. 80 years old. And I thought, I just looked in his eyes and I thought, this is a bad decision on my part. But I also couldn't tell him no, because this is what he loved to do. This was his identity. He had been doing it forever. And I thought, well, one more round, what can it hurt? And he dumped into the wagons, and I was leaving with the tractor and the wagons to go dump them in the bin, and he left. And I looked over my right shoulder and I thought, he just went the wrong way. And I got behind some buildings. We were right behind our house, the farm fields right around the buildings there. And I couldn't see where he was. And all of a sudden I saw all the electrical lines along the road shake and vibrate. And I knew he had left the auger out on the combine and he hit them. And I went over and, can't yell at him, can't do anything. But I'm like, man, this is several $1,000s worth of damage that just happened here. Didn't knock down any power lines, fortunately. So we got the combine, we pulled it back, and I says, let's stop for supper now. And he was like, yeah, let's stop for supper.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what was his reaction?
He felt really horrible, but about 2 days later, he came back out to the farm, and he was like, what can I do to help? And I says, Grandpa, let's sit down. We sat down in the shop, and I says, I think it's time for you to stop driving tractors and combine. And he says, it was just one accident, one time. It could have happened to anybody. I says, I know. But I'm not trying to take your life away from you, but I've got too many small kids around here. There's too many dollars invested in this equipment. We just can't keep doing this. And I appreciate all the help. I says, if you can help me, just, I'll drive a tractor to a field, and if they need to be brought back to get something else, you help me drive around. We'll still go to the farm meetings. I kept him involved, but that was like the second hardest conversation after the one I had to have with my dad about splitting up the farm, because here was a man, I was never really close to my grandpa. He and my grandma had gotten divorced when I was 3, and he had left. And so he came back actually at the end of my life, or at the end of his life. And so we had a couple of years, but I didn't really know him that well. So this guy was my grandpa, and you have to tell him the thing that you've always loved. And it was kind of funny because my in-laws, both my uncles and aunts and my father-in-law, were kind of after me to get him off the tractor in the spring. You got to stop doing this, you're using him too hard. I'm like, I'm not doing anything he doesn't want to do, so it's all stuff he loves to do. And then when I told him he couldn't drive any tractor anymore, they were upset with me because I had told him he couldn't do it anymore. I was like, I'm just caught in the middle here. But it was a hard decision, but it was the best one I could have made. And those are tough discussions that happen on farms, because there's not a retirement party. There wasn't, I had made this big investment, I've got a plan to go fishing every weekend now or play golf, because all Grandpa ever did was farm. And now, what was he going to do? And we redirected his efforts towards enjoying the great grandkids more and having a little bit more time to just, he didn't have any responsibility on the farm for a few years there. Now, you don't have to ask me if you can go. You just go, just do whatever. And on days when we were baling hay, he would come out and just watch me bale hay. I'd still let him rake hay or something simple, but he couldn't really run any big equipment anymore. And he told me about a year after that how much he appreciated me, because I wasn't demeaning to him. I didn't talk down to him. I just talked to him like a man to a man. Hey, for the betterment of the farm, for the betterment of the people that you love, for the betterment of you. And I said, for my own pocketbook's sake, because I was getting tired. There had been several costly repairs through that summer that could have been avoided, that were operator error. And I said, And so, and that's something that doesn't have to happen in a non-family business.
Right.
And especially off farm.
For myself, but I think it's just something from humans. There's the book, The Art of Letting Go. It's just we struggle with letting go.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing I personally struggle with. Even with my business. I've had to let go of a lot of stuff with Regeneissance because of all my lived experience and learning. I mean, it's just like the more I visit farms and ranches, the more I learn about what needs to be done, and there's so much to do, and I really struggle with letting go of I can't myself help solve everything as much as I want to, and all of that. But then in the context of this, it's huge for that, because you're letting go to, like you said, your identity that you've been farming your whole life, and there's something about being out in the tractor every single day. You're in your flow meditative state, and so you're asking someone to literally give that up. But then also from a physical standpoint, that's so hard for men. It's the physicality of it all, because now you're having to accept that you can't do that anymore, and that I hope that I'm decades away from that, because of it's something that, again, you just so ingrained into your day-to-day life. You don't think about it until you're forced to think about it, and you're like, well, damn, it's that time now. But then that's also why it's interesting that you're mentioning with the whole family aspect. That's just, again, just the unique aspect of agriculture, to where you have these families, and it's kind of like you're going back to, you need to be forced to think of this from generational standpoint, because when it's time to let go, it's like, all right, now it's the next part of this journey of spending it with your family and your grandchildren, and watching your children take the operation to the next height, or something like that. I don't know. It's just very interesting aspect of agriculture, and that's what I'm trying to portray to people that have never, that have been so disconnected from all of this. Because again, it's why I also try to tell people that it's an entirely different lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you want to homestead, you got to understand that this is an entirely different lifestyle. What you're getting into it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's a very. Thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah.
It's just interesting to hear.
Yeah. Well, and now we're in a different spot because we've had some really tough years financially with what the co-op just quit taking our milk. We got in a big battle with them, so I went 6 months with no income.
What year was that?
2022.
So I guess okay.
Fall of 2022.
So before, so that was still when you were conventional.
Yes.
Okay. So before leading up to that, I want to, because I do want to talk more on the conventional model of all things, because you were mentioning briefly earlier that your customer was another corporation, and then you were just talking on pretty much the whole process before leading to the actual customer that buys the milk to consume.
Mm-hmm.
What was that? So you took over from Grandpa, you know,
Mm-hmm.
he worked that first year while you're doing things, and then second year you were renting, and then the third year you eventually took over. What was that whole process once you finally took over? Because how many head of cattle
Well,
were there?
he didn't have any cattle. He was purely a grain farmer. I had split off from my dad.
Oh, I see.
I had split off from my dad, and he was purely a grain farmer. And so we were just like, I just need a little time.
Okay.
And so I'll do this. I know it's getting long, but I'll do this as fast as I can.
No, this is all part of it.
Yeah.
No need to speed up.
So we farmed there in Franklin County, and in 2005, the year after we bought the farm, was a new farm policy bill, and that expanded the ethanol mandate, the renewable fuels mandate, and corn was it just took off. The price went crazy. So in the fall of 2005, I remember I had filled all my grain bins. I had all the corn that I had forward contracted sold, and I had a little bit of corn left, sitting on my Chevy straight truck and a gravity wagon that I pulled behind it. And I thought, well, all I can do is stick it in the shed, and I didn't want birds crapping in it. And I was like, I'll just haul it to town and sell it. And so I took it into town, and all their bins were full, and they were making an outside storage pile of this corn. And they said, if you sell it today, you have to sell it. We aren't storing it. There's no storage because it's going on the outside pile. And so I was like, I don't care. You know, it's like, I don't know, 800 bushels between the two. I was like, I just want it out of my hair. I don't want to have to think about it. And I sold that corn for $1.53 a bushel. Okay. The next fall, corn was over $3 a bushel. So it had doubled in price. And I had bills to pay, a mortgage to pay, so I had to sell stuff instead of being able to hold it and get the higher price. And so this is going on. So 2006 comes, and there's this big push to build all these ethanol plants. And they're going around and they're having meetings with farmers. Hey, get down on the ground level, invest in this because it's going to be the next big boom, and we're projecting this much of a return on your investment. And what you had to do was pledge so many bushels or a piece of your ground or something to buy stock. So I pledged a whole bunch of bushels, and I bought to get my stock in this ethanol plant, farmer-owned ethanol plant. And things went pretty good, 2006, 2007. Then the great financial crisis hits, and they start going broke. Well, I'd also put up, in part of this deal, I had borrowed some money against my farm for stock because kind of young and naive, but I believed the salesman and all the other farmers around me were doing the same thing. I didn't think about the fact that they all had a lot more equity than I did. And so the co-op the ethanol plant went broke, which rendered all of our stock worthless. But the courts came out and said you still have to deliver the corn to the new owners at a different price, much lower than the price that I was originally going to. And that kind of put me upside down. I could have fought it a little bit more, but I just was emotionally drained. and I should have had the fight that I have now. Then it would have helped me a little bit more. So I didn't get, I got kind of forced to sell, but at the same time, my dad had finally seen the light of the big development that was going on in his area, and he sold all of the farmland for the big money, and he bought a farm out by us, and milked cows there. So it was about a 40-minute drive from us to there. So I would go over and I'd help him out because we'd gotten along. I mean, we'd been amiable. We'd all never missed a Christmas, never missed a birthday, just split the farm up. And so everything's going on with my land, and I'm looking at it now with the eye of experience and time away from it, and that's time separation. And my dad was kind of like, I want to get my son back here milking with me. I really believe that was part of it, but I also think he was like, plus he's got some equity in his land and he can be a cash infusion, you know? And I was. So I sold the farm that we were on. Grandpa had passed away the year before, so I wouldn't have sold it if Grandpa had still been alive. But he had passed away and nobody else wanted it. And the land boom had started in Iowa, so what I bought it for was about 4 times the value of what I bought it for. And so I was able to pay off my debts, had some money. I bought a different house, nothing extravagant, but bought a different house for us to live in, near to the dairy farm, and we bought a bunch of cows, started milking cows again, because I enjoyed livestock. I didn't really enjoy the cash crop lifestyle. I enjoyed livestock.
So then what year was that when you bought the livestock and moved?
2009.
Okay.
Yep. And if you go back and you look at so that was the beginning of 2009 when I did that. If you look at the year of 2009 and you look at the dairy prices, they stay way up here and they go way down here really fast. It was the lowest price I'd ever received for milk.
What changed then, or what happened then to where that had just such drastic change?
The 2008 great financial crisis had shifted consumer buying habits hugely, and worldwide buying habits hugely. And so we had this marketing set up for a certain consumer demand, and the demand just went away.
Yeah.
And it built back fairly quickly, but 2009 was, I think it was the largest or the second largest percentage exit of dairy farmers ever in our history. They just everybody quit. And so I had a little equity. We weathered that storm, but at the same time, we had a wind turbine farm startup near Dad's farm. And we were getting lots of anomalies of stray voltage in our dairy parlor, and it was affecting the milk production of the cows, affecting their ability to get bred back, because they were actually getting shocked every time they would touch a drinker or some metal component in the barn. And we were fighting this and fighting this and fighting this. And
like literally with lawsuits?
Yes. We ended up suing the power company. We couldn't, I can't prove it was the wind farm, but before the wind farm was there, we never had any problems. After we did. So I'm like, let's use logic.
Let's at least look into it.
Yeah, but the whole renewable fuel thing it just made it untouchable.
Yeah.
So we went through a court case. It lasted 7 years.
This was going on for 7 years.
7 years before.
And so the same problems with the electricity was happening for 7 years?
Yes, we could not, because they wouldn't do anything to correct anything, and our lawyers were like, we were like, there's nothing on our side we can correct, but they were like, if you do anything different, they'll say you changed management and that caused a cure of the problem or something. And I'm like, it's never going to happen. So when I was at Grandpa's farm, I had gone to work in town. I was also working in town, and I had moved into the maintenance department of a very large manufacturing company, food production manufacturing company, and had learned and been sent to school to do a lot of stuff with electronics. So I understood electricity. I had been schooled in it. I'm not a journeyman electrician or anything, but I had a lot of knowledge, and I worked more with the PLCs, the logic controls that run most of today's automated equipment. So I was in tune with what electricity is. I could figure out how to use a voltmeter. Like, this is not rocket science, guys. So we fought them, and it basically took $1.5 million of equity of my dad's to fight it. He ended up having to sell that farm, and that's how we ended up in Missouri, because he still wanted to milk cows. And my wife found this farm for sale or rent in 2016. So we are fighting a battle up there. I have gone back to town to work because our cow herd had gone from 200 cows to about 80 cows because they were just dying on us because of the stress, or they wouldn't breed back. And if a dairy cow doesn't breed back, she doesn't make milk. So we had to get rid of, we just fought and struggled. Dad sold a bunch of his equipment. I sold equipment. We were doing everything we could just to maintain until we thought we were going to win our court case. So finally it came down to, the reality of it was, Dad was just out of money, and he was like, I can't pay the property taxes this year on the farm. And they were very high. And he said, instead of going to the bank and trying to borrow money or going to family, he says, I'm just going to sell it. And my wife was looking for opportunities for us, really. I had a pretty good job that I was working in a maintenance in a different factory, and so we were doing okay, but I was just killing myself working 50 hours a week at the plant, and then dairy farming and planting crops and farming about 200 acres at the time. And so Dad found a buyer for the farm, sold the farm, got his debts kind of paid off, and we moved down here and rented this place in 2016, or Dad did. Dad and Mom moved down here. We moved the equipment and the cattle. And I kind of thought, for the second time, I'm out of dairy farming and not going to do this again. The company I was working for had another plant in St. Joseph, Missouri, and they transferred me down there. So I was about an hour away from this farm then at that time. And we were trying to sell our house.
Was that just by chance that it just happened to be an hour, like the plant, or did you ask to?
No, they came up. There was an opening at that plant, and we had already moved Dad down here. I had been working up there for a year. Dad was down here.
Okay.
And they came to me and said, hey, we want to transfer you to this plant. It's a different position, management, kind of quite a step up the ladder. And I was like, we still didn't have our court case was still in limbo. It was still going through appeals and all this stuff. So I didn't know what the outcome of that was going to be. So I was like, well, probably shouldn't stare a gift horse in the mouth here. Pretty good substantial pay raise, and they were going to move my family, and I was like, yeah, we'll do it. So we moved down there, and we decided not to. We hadn't sold our home up there yet because they didn't offer a buyout of the house. So I says, well, I don't want to leave this house sitting empty out in the country till we get it sold. We'd had it on the market for a year already, hadn't been able to move it. I says, let's just leave it here. You guys stay up here. This isn't going to take that long. It took 18 months to get the house sold.
So they stayed there for 18 months?
They stayed there for 18 months. And I was working 4 on, 4 off. And I would go up sometimes on my 4 off, but then other times I would have meetings that I'd have to go to in between there. So I would just come and stay with Mom and Dad. But I rented a studio apartment, an old remodeled grade school. It was just the worst place I've ever lived in all my life. And, I'm sure there's a hell. I'm sure it's worse than that, but just a little bit worse. It was horrible. I had my pickup get stolen there. I mean, it was a learning experience. I was like, why does anybody live in a city? I didn't understand it after that. But things were going. Dad was kind of teetering, but he was staying at it. Mom was doing her thing. And we were in our second appeal. We had won both appeals, but they kept appealing the ruling. And April of 2017, my mom called me on a three-way call with my sister, which was very unusual, so I knew something was up. And she told me, hey, they just found out that I have cancer. And it's colon cancer, and it's very aggressive. We're going to do all we can. Okay, you got this, Mom. You can fight this. She was 3 days past 65. So, we were like, she's young, she's healthy. July 17th of that year, she was gone. It was just that fast. There was just nothing they could do that. So my mom had started her treatments and was just debilitated by them. She wasn't able to really function.
Yep.
So we hadn't sold our house, but my wife was like, Dad and Mom need help. I'll move in with them, and she took care of my mom for the last 4 months of her life.
Wow.
And along with my two youngest kids. My two older boys were off, in college and living life and doing the things that those guys that are 18 and 20 do. So the two younger kids and my wife moved in. We put all of our stuff in storage, just reduced the heck out of the price of the house because I was like, we just got to get done. We just got to be, we ended up selling it for less than we bought it for 9 years before then. But I was like, that's fine. We're done. We're back together as a family. I would never recommend a father or a husband work for 2 years away from his family like that. That was stressful all the way around. But God was good. We made it through there. September comes around of 2017, and my dad, the next appeals court hearing is coming, and it's in Iowa. My dad says, I'm going to go to that. It's on a Wednesday. We said, that's fine, Dad. Go do your thing. I'm working. So the two younger kids took care of his cows and did the farming that day. He comes back and he says, I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know. He called me on his way home. He said, I don't know how it's going to go. He says, they all talked. I don't know. I don't know what's going on here. This is a different world than what we know anything about. That coming Saturday, I'm at work doing my thing. Wife and kids are in the house doing their thing. He had done chores. He came in to take a nap, and he woke up, and the aorta blew off the top of his heart. And he fell down. My wife was in the basement of the house. He fell down on the floor. She heard the thud. She didn't know what it was. She came up to see him lying on the floor. And because his aorta had burst, it had filled his body with blood, and he had swollen up and turned black. She called 911. They life flighted him over to Missouri, and he lived through it. They were able to save him. So he's still alive, but he couldn't farm after that at all. So we were faced with a decision to quit altogether and sell out Dad, or me take it over again for now the third time. And in the middle of that, we won our court case, and I have never been involved in something so slimy in all my life, but that was slimy. So we got through that, and then we started farming again. In 2018, I worked for a year. My family just got around me and helped me get going, and then we kind of got our feet under us, and we kept farming. We were still renting the farm. I was selling to the dairy co-op, doing what I had always done, but now I had been in the corporate world a little bit more, and I started to understand contracts a little bit better. I had gotten savvy to the world, I guess. And so when they started coming out with new things that I had to sign, I would start reading them, and I would go, I don't agree with this, I don't agree with this, I don't agree with this. And you could just see their step-by-step control that they were taking over all of us as independent farmers. And I said, I don't go along with this anymore. And I just made a ruckus. I just thought, this is a employee or farmer-owned co-op. Every farmer has a voice. You better start speaking up.
Can you just talk on, you're saying the co-op, can you explain to someone that might not understand what you're talking on, especially in the context of dairy?
So dairy co-ops were created in the 1920s as a tool to pool members' milk. So there's members, it was usually of a certain locale. It wasn't across the nation at first. And then they could have a larger bulk of milk to offer to a processor, a creamery, it was what they were all called back then, so that everybody could get a little bit more, a little bit higher price, but they would also get a more equal price across that group. So you were using the power of collective bargaining really to gain and get a better price. Those were challenged pretty hard in the early 20s, and then the Capper-Volstead Act was passed in I think 22 or 24, something, 1922 or 1924, to allow those. And it was actually the railroad monopolies were actually the ones that were fighting against the formation of co-ops, because they said that it was a monopoly move. So it was like, use your logic and you can see that it's not. So they kind of rewrote the laws to allow for that. It's a special law that allows farmers to get together to garner a better price through collective bargaining through the volume of their farms. And the original idea was that it was supposed to be farmer directed, farmer owned, so it was grassroots and closely connected. You got into the 40s and technology got to where we were able to store milk better. Our transportation got better, so we could more easily haul it between various locations. And co-ops began to own what they called balancing plants, which were mostly butter plants, where they could take excess milk in the spring or in the summer that wasn't being used and consumed as fluid milk, put it into a storable product, and then put it back out on the market. We got really good at that, really efficient at that, so much so that our storehouses of that began to explode. And that's where we got into government subsidized cheese and butter and all that stuff, was because the co-ops had so much of it. The government just made a backstop and said, hey, we'll store it, we'll give it away in food programs, we'll do whatever we can. And they stored it mostly in caves south of Kansas City, was where a lot of it was stored. And because they didn't have to have refrigeration, as said, because it was they were very deep caves, and they were able to keep it cool and at a constant temperature and low humidity. So so that was the co-ops as an idea are a great idea. They failed once they got into the processing side of things, where they were controlling that. Then they had an interest in how to make money on this. Well, if you can't make enough money on the outside, output side, what do? Oh, I got to lower the cost of my inputs. So then they were kind of working against themselves. Those farmers were wanting more, and the co-op was needing a lower priced input. And we had gone from having total farmer control. Now we were hiring outside managers that weren't farmers, that were getting paid for the profitability of the co-op. And he was sitting there going, well, I got to make this co-op profitable so I get my bonus. So we got to lower the price of milk, because we can't raise the price, because it's government's, government is the final arbiter of that price, because that's what we were selling the market into the market of, was the excess. So we went from a really good idea, and again, it came back to, we lost the idea of community and we went to industrialization. If those different co-ops that were just community minded would have just stepped back and said, I tell you what, everybody here, don't sell, 10% of your milk. You just dump it. Mm-hmm. It'll keep the price higher on the other 90% that you won't notice that, but we won't end up making a storable product that they can hold over our heads to lower the price for years to come. And we just didn't think outside the box enough there back in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and especially the 70s, because there was then that government subsidization. Well, they were subsidizing that began to indirectly subsidize the farmer. Then they directly subsidized the farmer through a lot of different things that were going on in the 70s. And again, we lost all of our market signals. The market was telling us we have too much milk. But the government was telling you, if you don't make more milk, you'll get less money from us. So we didn't have a free market at that point in time. And when you don't have a free market, you ignore the market signals. So we just continue to expand that surplus. That surplus just kept growing. That got you to the 80s. We had the whole herd buyout because we had too many cattle and they were tired of paying for cheese. And they got rid of 15 million cows. I think 5 million cows. I don't remember the exact number now anymore. But it was a lot of cattle. They just bought and killed them. And it killed
Who bought them?
the U.S. government. And they had to be culled and slaughtered. They paid the farm. Well, they didn't buy the cows. They paid the farmer so much money for lost milk income, and then the farmers had to cull the cows. So then they took them to the marketplace, and they flooded the market, and then it killed the beef price because there was all these extra dairy cows that weren't ready to come to the market normally, came prematurely, and to this day, if you get around an old farmer, old rancher, he will cuss out every dairy farmer he sees because it broke a lot of ranches because of that government policy. So,
And then for dairy farmers too, especially conventional, are most of them tied to a co-op?
yes.
Or because I know, say like Alexander Family Farms or a smaller one, how are they able to go that route versus most conventional that just go the co-op? Is it because the ones like Alexander to where they're probably working extra hard to make sure they can go that route, or because I'm assuming that's a selling point too of a co-op is you don't have to sell it to anybody. We just come up, pick it up, you just milk. Is that how they go about it?
Yes. And I'll tell you what, it's a lot easier if all you have to do is worry about milking cows.
Yeah.
It's so much easier. And then you're just concerned about volume and meeting the minimum quality standards. You don't ever have to worry about, are they picking up my milk? It's Christmas. You don't have to think about it. Do I have to bottle today? It's, the weekend and you're wore out, but you still got to deliver milk on a Saturday morning after you pulled a calf because that's your job. That's the other half of, 60% of your job is to keep your farm going is you have to market that milk. So it's much easier, but it is also, you lose all control. You're just a number. Once your milk goes on that tank, you don't own it anymore. It is now the co-ops, and they do what they say, and then they tell you what they're going to pay you for it.
Yeah, convenience can kill. I mean, it kills the consumer, but then as you're just describing for the producers too.
Yeah.
And so, which the difficulty on that too, as we can talk on, is if you want to get out, how can you?
Don't do it the way I did it.
Well, how can you get out of, if you're a conventional dairy farmer and say you still want to do dairy, but the conventional way, how are you even able to separate yourself from the co-op but still make it?
Well, there's a few farms that have done that by in making huge investments of millions of dollars into bottling equipment, pasteurizing equipment, homogenizing equipment, and then they go out and they find stores that they can put their product in. So they meet all of the qualifications of pasteurized, homogenized, USDA grade A inspected. But they do not have the volume to spread their fixed costs across. So therefore, they're always higher priced than a co-op milk going into Walmart, or our local grocery store here is called Pringer's. So Prairie Farms, great value, Highland Dairy, they're always going to be able to beat that independent bottler because they have volume. And they can also, there is a reality that people buy shelf space. So if you're an independent, you don't have the money to do that. So you're just going in there and you're going like, hey, can I drop off 50 gallons of milk this week and see how it sells? They go, yeah, and they forget to put it out. It doesn't get put out in the grocery aisle, or if they do put it out in the grocery aisle, they've put up their markup on it, and they're like, I don't care if this sells or not, but if it does sell, I'm going to make a premium on it, so it's going to be $3 a gallon more than great value. Well, anybody that comes by, we're conditioned to think of stuff in not by value but by cost. So this milk over here is nearby. You're supporting a local producer. Who supports your local community. There's greater value in that milk. But this milk over here is cheaper, even though it gets produced 1,000 miles away and bottled in a plant 150 miles away. That's cheaper. So I'm going to buy this. Doesn't have the same value. Doesn't have the same community. Doesn't have the same values as you, but it's cheaper. And so you vote with your dollars. You buy this, and that guy goes, okay, I can't sell milk there. So there is a possibility. I know some other commercial dairymen who have gone into making just specialty cheeses. There's a guy about an hour and a half south of us. He milks a couple hundred cows, and that's what they do with about a third of their milk is make specialty cheeses. We have looked into that for our farm, but we're short on labor. And one of the things that you find in the direct to consumer is everybody's got wonderful ideas, but nobody wants to help do them. It's like, you got to figure out how much time do I have.
You just described humanity in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yes. So there's ways to get out of it, but then the other way is to do what we've done and just we're very low cost in terms of our bottling system. It's all manual, to be honest with you. Our storage is very simple, but it's effective, and so we have low cost on our output to the consumer, but we have much higher cost on the front end than a conventional because we're selling into a premium market because we've decided to differentiate ourselves. So we're looking at, we use a lot more pasture. We use a lot less bought and feed. We do not get maximum milk production, but we have still the cost of that cow, still the cost of just the infrastructure that you have to have, and so we sell at a higher premium. We try to help out with our convenience by getting it, quickly to an area. But again, if you want to come and get it at midnight, if you want to pick up milk at midnight, I'm not going to go out on the road and deliver milk at midnight. But we have had people show up here to pick up out of our U-Pick at like 1 in the morning. I was out one morning milking cows, and the good customer of ours walked in, and he was in his pajamas and flip-flops, and I was like, it's like 5 in the morning. I'm like, what are you doing? And I called him by name, and he goes, we didn't realize that we were out of milk, and all the munchkins want cereal, so I came over to get milk. I was like, hey, it's in there. Go get it. And that's about the most convenient I can be.
Yeah.
But but you also have to have a different mindset because I have no backstop. I can't count on that milk check. I count on my consumer. And that has been my biggest challenge, and the thing that I have to wrap my mind around is I am dependent on the mood of every consumer, the schedule of every consumer that comes in to buy product from me. I can't just take a large volume and take it to a grocery store and expect to be paid for it. So I have to constantly work with every consumer to keep them on board and explain our story. And that's hard to do. It's much funner to go out and bale hay, to look at your cows, to move fence, to feed the pigs. That's what I like doing. But I have to force myself then to get in touch with my consumer and continually do that marketing. And I never had to do that before as a conventional dairyman.
So this was 2018, 2019. I wanted to go back to that too. So you're here after taking over and being Dairy Farm Part 3.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like on a, I guess, day-to-day basis of, just take me in the mind of just day-to-day life of a conventional dairy farmer then.
So I was back in my element after having punched a clock and, kind of I enjoyed the experience because it gave me a lot of unique experiences that I wouldn't have got any other way, and it expanded my knowledge, got me some extra input into technology that I didn't have before. And so, but I didn't like being in a building all day long. So I got the opportunity to come back, and I remember for about 6 months I was just playing catch up. I was getting I had been helping my dad out a little bit, but I didn't know the suppliers. I didn't, I was trying to build that network. Everything, it doesn't matter what business you are in, you have to have some kind of a network. You've got to have some people that hey, I can go to this guy to get this, I can go to that guy to get that, he's got these answers, those types of things. So I was really playing catch up, and I was, for my family, the 2 kids that were left and my wife, we were relearning that schedule and getting back into that, and then at the same time processing the fact that my dad had had a near-death experience, my mom had just passed away, so there was just a lot of that weight, but there was a sense of excitement for me, and my wife was not real happy I was back milking cows again, to be real honest with you. She was supportive, but this was not her first hope for us. And my 2 younger kids were helping me on the farm and have helped me and are doing great, but they weren't super excited about it either. And my older boys were actually very unhappy with me that I had come back, and I should have listened to them a little bit more, but I was dad and I was going to do, because I didn't realize how much I had relied on them for labor when we were going through our stray voltage issues up, because I had to go to town and work, and I was like, you guys got to go do this so I can go to work, and you should appreciate the fact that I'm bringing home. I mean, I was a real jerk about some of that. And they had a lot of animosity. I have said before, my oldest son, I almost lost my oldest son because of the stray voltage. I was so tunnel visioned on winning that battle. And if I had to do it again, and I've told other dairy farmers that have reached out to me about how to fight stray voltage, I tell them it's not worth it. Just move, get to a different farm. You probably aren't going to get it taken care of. You're going to be in a long court battle. If you do get it taken care of, it's going to drain you emotionally. It's going to be hard on your family. And my oldest son and I have never been as close as we were before then, simply because I couldn't. It took all my bandwidth to keep doing that.
Yeah.
And so they were a little bit hesitant about me getting back in here, because what if that happens again, Dad? Are you going to turn into that guy? And they were concerned for their younger siblings. I mean, not that I ever did anything. I didn't abuse them or physically hurt anybody, nothing like that. But it was just that emotional stress and that disconnect of, I became more about, if I make the farm work, everything will be good with my family. And that was the wrong attitude to have. I should have been like, I'm going to make everything work with my family, and the farm will work itself out. Because in the end, none of the effort that I put into making that all happen really did anything. It came down to the whim of, 8 jury people in the box, and then 3 judges after that, 3 judge panels after that. Really wasn't about me. It was just about, the previous precedent and law that everybody had to do.
It goes back to my point of letting go. That's very, I mean, that's part of it. Like, that's the fact that you couldn't let go of that. And
yeah. So I was struggling with, why isn't my family more excited about what I'm doing? I'm back on the farm. I get to see them every day, but then, you don't have a steady paycheck. You don't have health insurance provided by your employer, and all of those benefits that are real tangible benefits. You can't deny them. And my 2 older boys were a little hard on me. I mean, and honest, in a good way, challenging. Just, Dad, what are you doing? Are you doing this because you want to do it, or are you doing it because you want to save face for Grandpa, and say that you carried on a farm for your dad? And they both basically told me, we don't want anything to do with the farm because of that. And that was hard for me to deal with, but it was also the raw reality of farming today. And so I was excited about it. Those first 6 months, I was struggling to get my feet back under me. But I remember we went to family members, or a friend of ours' wedding. They're one of their kids' wedding, and you're going through the line at the end, and we. So it was a boy who was the same age as my son, and they had palled around all through high school, and and we were, my wife and his mother are best friends, So, and the dad and I are good friends. He farms still up there in Iowa, so we had a lot in common. And we're going through the line at the end, and greeting the family, and well wishes to the groom and the happy couple. And we come up to Keith was the guy's name, the father of the groom, our friend, and he says to the bride's dad, who I don't have any idea what his name was, this is our good friend JR and Christy and their son Jeff, and we're really excited that they came up here. And Jeff and Tristan were great friends all through high school. Just a little small talk. And the guy looks at me and he goes, "So what do you do?" Just making small talk. And I said, "I'm a dairy farmer." And I had not said that to anybody else before I started since I began milking cows again. I didn't have to say I'm a supervisor at blah, blah, blah company. I drive truck for blah, blah, blah company, none of that stuff. And it was a fulfilling moment that I can't explain to anybody, because it was like I had my identity back. Mm-hmm. And I remember driving home, and it was about an hour and a half drive home. And I told my wife, "I feel like I'm back to where I need to be." And she was like, "What if none of the rest of us feel it?" So I'm way up here, and she goes, "What if none of the rest of us feel like that?" And now I'm back down here.
Yeah.
And we just kind of had that tension as a family for a couple of years. My oldest daughter got married. My youngest son graduated from high school, and he had wanted to become an electrician, so I got him an apprenticeship, and he just went from there, and doing great. All my kids are doing great. We love him. I love them all. Well-adjusted, productive members of society, all those things. But it was, if I could go back and do it over, I would do a lot of things different there. And still farmed, but I would have changed my emphasis. I would have made it more about my family instead of about the farm. And I would have made it much more where they were the focal point of my energy instead of the farm. We all have to make our work. You have to provide for your family. It takes energy, it takes labor. You get tired from it. But I was just, every day I was emotionally spent from the problems on the farm. You would walk in and you would see a cow that was fine yesterday, and today she's got some neurological thing going on, and you're tired of calling the vet. You owe the vet too much money, so you're doing all the research yourself. You're doing everything you can, and you don't have any success, and the cow dies, and you're going, and that just constant beating of you, and then the financial stress that comes along, and then the lawyers are going, well, if we don't get $12,000 for this next expert, our case is done, and so you got to go and find $12,000. Remember, literally, that's what we did. And I went, and all I had left was a home equity loan on my farm, on my house. And so I went and got a home equity loan to finance that. And my wife was like, "We need a new car," and I was like, "We can't get a new car because we got to pay this every month now on a home equity loan so that we could have, this expert." It was just too much for my family. But I was in it. And once I started, I couldn't see a way to stop, and I couldn't see a way to, I really felt like if we stopped, then we would be looked at as liars, like it had never happened. And that's unfortunate that our agriculture community can be like that. If you're not successful, they assume it's because you did something wrong, not because there could be an outside force, bad luck, stray voltage, hail damage comes through and knocks, a tornado, whatever it may be. That can never be the problem. It's always that guy just wasn't a good farmer, and I didn't want that to be the legacy that we left. In reality, by the time we left, that's probably what our legacy was, because it was just we just got to where there was no cash flow. Everything was difficult.
As conventional.
Yes.
So I guess as time was going on, what was making it so challenging?
Well, it just when you go from 2019 to 2020, and COVID hits, and we had this. This was, I think that pandemic opened up a lot of people's eyes to the way the world was working, and then other people just closed their eyes harder because they didn't want to accept it. And that was when I really began to see the lack of resiliency in the U.S. agriculture system, especially in terms of food production. Because I was like, we're producing milk, and this is when I first really began about selling direct to consumers, because I was like, we're producing milk. We didn't have to dump milk here, but we were pretty close. There was a route fairly close to us that did have to dump. So,
why'd they have to dump?
Because all the restaurants had closed, all the colleges were empty, nursing, all those institutions had closed, and that's when I learned about, when I really truly understood what we're doing is just selling to institutions. We could not package cheese in a package for the consumer, because we were used to packaging it in 50-pound blocks or 25-pound bags of shredded cheese. We did not have the bags to put a pound of mozzarella cheese in. And we didn't have enough. We had the people, we had the milk, we literally didn't have the packaging. And so they were like, we don't know where to go with this milk because we do not have a package for it. And that's why everybody started dumping milk. And I was sitting there, and people were going to the store and they couldn't get dairy products, sour cream, butter, whatever it was. And I was like, but I'm right here, and I could do that. And I just briefly in that time frame, I just looked at the laws and I was like, it's a lot of work. I ain't going to do that. But through that, we had a lowering of the price because, hey, what are we going to do with your milk if we can't do anything with it? And then we had a lot of just really screwy pricing things that happened through there that just, the formula for how milk is priced is, it's more complicated than how to figure out the math to get somebody to the moon. It's just a ridiculous formula that doesn't make any sense, and it's weighted averages, and it doesn't make any sense. But we were getting to where it was just costing us so much money. So the Board of Trade price would be like $28 a hundred.
Mm-hmm.
Our final price to us would be like $17. Because they would have this new formula in there that would take $8 or $9 out to give to the processors. And we needed that money. The cost of everything was going higher. The supplies were costing us more. It was getting more difficult to get services. And so that was kind of that initial eye-opening to me that we have a serious problem. The big guys in the industry are doing fine because they're getting priced milk differently. They're getting sweetheart deals on transportation, a lot of different things. And that's when I became more aware of the disparity between the small farmer and the large farmer. And I just started to investigate that. And I was like, man, this is not what the founders of a co-op wanted. This is not what anybody intended for this to turn into, but this is the natural end of the manipulation of the market that has happened for 70 years. We're to the point now where it's in the hands of a few concentrated farms, and the rest of us don't mean anything. And now we're looked at as a surplus, and those large farms are looked at as the first order supplier. And so all of those things combined, and then just the outrageous cost of just doing business now. It costs so much more through whether you want to call it inflation or loss of the value of the dollar. It's not just even increased regulation. It's just overall everything's costing more, and you can't, especially as a small farm, you can't pass that cost on. You have to figure out how to eat it. And so the only thing you can do is increase production and decrease costs to get that increased production. And at some point in time, you run out.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at the last 4 years is small guys have just run out. We don't have any more. There's nothing else. There's no other fat to cut, and there's no more production to be gained. We're kind of topped out there.
So then what was your quote unquote breaking point?
So the co-op came out and asked me to sign a contract that's called, the acronym for it is FARM. It stands for Farmers Assuring Responsible Management. And it was sign this, and it's been around for like 20 years before then. I'd always signed it, never really read it. It was just one of the things you did, But I had become so aware of so many disparities that were going on after 2020. I was like, I'm reading this. And now, the first one I ever signed was 1 page. Now it's like 30 or 40 pages. So I got in there and I start reading it, and I'm like, boy, I have some serious questions here. Mm-hmm. So I get out a notebook, and at night after chores, I'm just pouring over this thing. And I go for about 3 weeks just really studying it, asking questions. And then the representative from the co-op comes out to verify that you've signed it, and he wants to sign it. And he says, well, you got to sign that in front of me. And I says, well, I have some questions for you. So he goes in the house with me, and we sit down, and I open up my notebook, and I got like 5 pages of questions for him. And he's like, what is this? And I says, there's some things that don't set right here with me. And I went through and I just delineated to him everything that I just was having problems with. From the way the book was just worded and written, it was written like, all the questions were, do your employees know? Do your employees know? I was like, I'm a small farm. I don't have any employees. Why isn't there a book written for the owner-operator? I says, this is written by a bunch of dairy farmers. Why can't we have one written for a dairy farmer to sign? I know who I call for emergencies. I'm the only guy who calls for emergencies. So why's that got to be in here? MSDS sheets. Yes, I know where they are. But guess what? I'm the only one that handles the chemicals. So, and I buy them and I know what they are. It's just redundant to me. So there was that. And then there was, as we went farther, they got into a lot of stuff about carbon capture and what you're doing for cover crops and how much fertilizer you put on and how much diesel fuel you use and a lot of these questions. And I said, I don't understand why you need to know any of this stuff. I'm selling you milk. Well, that's when I realized that what they were doing was I didn't understand what ESG scores were, environmental social governance. But after he left and he gave me a few tidbits of information, well, we're doing this for our customers. And that's when I first realized for a second time, I realized that customers were institutions, not people. I realized what they were doing was they were using my good practices on my farm to whitewash whatever the corporation was doing and to use it to give them validity and say, this is how we're being socially responsible and environmentally responsible. And I says, why am I giving you my good name? And I says, that doesn't make any sense to me. And he says, well, you're not really. And I says, well, then I shouldn't have to do this. And he goes, well, it's totally voluntary. And I said, well, that's great. And two other things they were requiring was I had to have my vet sign it. Well, I had been working on a shoestring budget for a lot of years, and I rarely ever had my vet on the farm. And I have always been kind of a minimalist when it came to any kind of antibiotic intervention or anything like that. So I was really more concerned about keeping animals healthy instead of correcting a sickness. And I says, my vet's like out here once, maybe twice a year. I just don't call the vet that often. And he said, well, we got to have his number. And I said, well, I don't always call the same vet. It depends on who's available. And I just thought that was that's a relationship between me and him. Why does the dairy co-op got to know who my vet is? And then they said, finally, he says, part of this is you're going to have a third-party inspection, and it could be unannounced. Maybe, maybe not. And I said, well, who's the third party? Well, we don't know. And I says, well, that just raises, you don't just want anybody walking all over your farm. You don't know what their agenda is.
Well, this is also the fact that they don't even know.
Right.
That's pretty telling.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we're forcing you, but we have no idea who we're forcing the person on you.
Yes. So he says to me, he says, well, it's voluntary. And I said, well, I voluntarily decide not to sign this. And I thought we were done. A couple weeks later, he comes out and he goes, well, it's voluntary, but our customers, again, the institutions, require that everybody that we sell milk to has signed this, has agreed to this.
So voluntary in quotation, heavy quotations.
Yes,
voluntary.
yes. I told him, I says, you have a very different definition of voluntary than I do.
It's like textbook, like movie villain stuff right there.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah. So, and he was a great guy that I had gotten along with for years.
See, that's my problem is, it's a great guy.
Yeah. Yeah, but he's just doing his job.
Yes.
He's just doing, and I told him, I says, listen, you need to go back and tell them that I have these concerns. I am one of the owners of this co-op. I should have some say. We should have a discussion about this. And that got nowhere. I called my representative that was on the board, got nowhere. And I thought, well, they haven't said anything to me. I was kind of thinking, I won't say anything, you don't say anything, and we'll just all act like we're happy. December 11th of 2022 was the last time they sent a milk truck to get milk from me.
Really?
Yep.
So just outed you.
Just outed me. Yep. Yep. And to be fair to them, I kind of knew that was coming, and I was in that fight. I say, we kind of were, I was kind of doing that guerrilla warfare thing, and I knew that they were going to be doing something to me, but I just didn't know what, and it was starting to weigh on me. And I had kind of gone into a semi-state of depression. I wasn't doing a real good job with the cows. My quality of my milk had kind of, tapered off.
And this is 2022?
Yep. And so I kind of gave them a little bit of a reason to kick me out, but it wasn't the reason. I mean, it was the reason they used, but it wasn't the reason that I got kicked out.
And this is also, this is just all of agriculture, because if folks have never heard of this book, it's very good to read Meat Racket.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially what you just experienced, that's what Tyson does to
Mm-hmm.
where Jerry Yandel from the book describes the example of whenever he spoke out and showed his concerns, what happened, the exact same thing. They just pretty much get outed.
Yeah.
And that's just what happens time and time again. Whenever it's pretty much corporatized and they own it all, you're their you're their servant.
Yeah.
And so if you speak out anyway at all, you are done.
Yeah.
So interesting. So 2022, that rolls around, and so that ends essentially.
Yep. That ends my commercial dairyman's career.
So then what do you do from there?
I didn't handle that real well. I drank too much, and I just ignored everything. I'm just being honest. I just shut the world out.
Yeah.
And then just before Christmas, after just sitting out in the barn looking at cows, I hadn't been drinking that day. I was just did the minimal stuff. I milked the cows, but I dumped all the milk. Hadn't really put a plan together of what I was going to do. I was avoiding the bank calls. I was avoiding, I just shut down. And I shouldn't have done that, but I did. And I came up to the house, and my wife met me at the door. And she looked at me and she said, honey, you are the guy, this is verbatim what she said, You are the guy that would charge hell with a squirt gun and fight. And you're going to lay down and take this. So she said, you figure out. You either fight for the farm, you fight for our kids, you fight for me, but you figure out what you're going to fight, or we quit and you go back to town and we're done. But you have to figure it out. She didn't cuss at me. She was a little loud, but she wasn't screaming at me. She wasn't like poking her finger. She was just waving her hand at me. And it was the thing I needed to wake up. And I said, okay. And I said, I'll get a plan. I need a little time to process a plan. So I just started out and I was like, well, I got to do something with the bank because I'm out of compliance now, because in agriculture, we always think that the bank is financing us. What the bank is actually financing is the market. They're financing that next level. They're saying, we have faith in the market down here. This operation is just a stepping stone to that. And unfortunately for everybody in agriculture, it's a real hard thing to realize that you're just the pass-through. You're pass-through for the lender, you're pass-through for government payments, you're just the pass-through. Because you don't produce food, you produce a commodity. So you don't have a community that depends on you. You have institutions that just extract from you. And so got the bank kind of settled down. We sold a bunch of cows to get some debt paid down. And all my kids came home for Christmas that year. All our kids came home for Christmas. And we didn't have a lot of money, so we kind of had a thin Christmas, but we put on our thing and did our stuff. And got done opening gifts and stuff. And I just told all the kids, I just was real honest, this is where we're at. We may quit, we may not. I don't know. This is what's happened. And I explained the story to them. And I'm crying because I'm like bearing my soul to my children. And then I just looked at each one of them and I said, I am sorry. I haven't done what I should have done. I haven't been the dad that I should have been. I apologize. And I ask that you forgive me. And my oldest son, who is 6'4", so he's just a mountain of a kid. He's a whole head taller than I am. And like 260, 270 pounds, I don't know. Just strong, good-looking, handsome dude. And he gets up and he walks over and he's got a smile on his face. And I looked at him and I stood up and he gave me this great big bear hug. And he just said, we're here for you, Dad. And I was like, okay. And then my 1.5-year-old granddaughter, runs over and hugs my leg. And now I am just the Pillsbury Doughboy. I'm just folded up. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, I have to fight for my family. I have to fight for a place for them. And so...
What was that moment like? Especially your oldest and then obviously grandchild.
Oh, the most humbling thing I'd ever been through in my life, because as a dad, you're supposed to have all the answers. You're supposed to be everybody's rock. You know, if you're doing dad right, everybody trusts in dad, and everybody looks at dad and goes, nothing can take dad down. And here I am going, I haven't been what I've supposed to been. And I mean, I went back like 10 years. I was like, when you guys were in high school, I was really just brutally honest. And it just is this intense vulnerability. And my wife was sitting next to me and she was supporting me, but she was kind of like, whatever happens now is on you, buddy. But she was there. I mean, she was there for me, but she was kind of like, and then when he came over, and I just realized I was vulnerable, and I realized that I needed to get my team back, and I alienated my greatest asset, which was my family, and I'm still working on doing that. Just because we had that moment, that didn't erase everything.
Absolutely.
But it was a start.
Yeah.
And then then when my granddaughter grabbed my leg, I was like, that was one of the things that really turned my worldview around, because I was like, stop fighting for the moment and start fighting for the future. If you're always fighting for the moment, it's that instant gratification. It's that right now, it's what you can control. If you're fighting for the future, the fight is never done, and it has always got a long-term strategy, and it always has to be implemented every day, and it's going to benefit somebody you may not even meet, but it will not detract from them. And I was just like, I can't do that. So that just made me reevaluate who I was as a man, who I was as a father, humbled me, made me very repentant of a lot of things that had happened in my life. And again, a lot of people would say, well, you were a good dad. You did this. You were at their ball games. You were at this. I just knew what I had done. I had expected, I had kind of taken their childhood away, especially my two older boys, because I was so, you got to work, and your value is in your work. And I think most guys in agriculture, the young boy wants to be like their dad and work, but I had taken it to another level.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
it wasn't supposed to be there. So I'm humbled, I'm repentant, but then I'm resolved that I've got to do something, and not lose a heritage, not lose the farm, and just work through that. And all I could do was work. And I shared my vision for my kids that day, that I wanted to have a place where if one of them wanted to come back and farm, they could at any time. And I just opened that door up to all of them. And none of them have taken me up on that yet. And I don't know that they will. They've forgiven me. I have asked for forgiveness. That doesn't mean that everything's 100%, and I'm okay with that, because I'm in a place where I'm okay with it from the standpoint I certainly want 100%, but the ball's in their court now, and they've got to be comfortable coming to me. But my two older boys, I worked them like dogs, just because we had to beat the giant of the electric company, and we had to keep our good name, and we had to keep Grandpa farming, and I never put any focus on them. It was just all on all those things, and that was, they're good, they're well-adjusted kids. None of them are drug addicts or anything like that, and they're not in therapy, but I could have certainly done a better job through all that.
Then how did you, to transition a little bit, for the raw dairy aspect too, how did you go land to that then? Because you're still the dairy farmer, but why, because a lot of, with dairy too, it's very polarizing, even with dairy farmers. So talking raw milk, that's huge. So where'd that come from?
A complete attitude of rebellion and wanting to see the system burn down. I had seen the underside of the belly, and I was like, this cannot last. I don't know what else I can do. I don't have any money. I don't have any political connections. I don't have any clout in the dairy industry. What is something I can do to bring awareness to the plight of the dairy farmer? And not even bring awareness, but to say, there's an independent man out there that's worth something, that's defined by more than his commodity, and has a value and should be respected just because he's created in the image of God, and he's laboring. There's value to that, and you have destroyed that, and you have made it all be about how dollar efficient you are. And we have changed our animals, and we have changed our structure, and we have changed our community. And I just came away from that Christmas, that time around Christmas, just invigorated to say, there has to be somebody that's out there that shows a way that you cannot be in this system. And I didn't do it out of a martyr complex or any even desire to be a leader among people or anything, because I don't think I am. I just was like, I looked around and I started asking questions of a lot of people. There were small raw milk dairies around, and we toured them and we asked questions. And they were all people who hadn't really been conventional dairy farmers. They had been homesteaders and had one cow and then two cows, and then that project developed into 8 cows or something like that. So I was really like, okay, there's no model out there for this where a farm can actually really do this. That was my experience at the time. Since then I have found that there are those models out there. But I said to my wife, I said, so we have to transition this. And she says, how do we do that? I says, I don't know. There's no roadmap. There's nobody I can call. There's not an extension agent that I can get a hold of. We don't have money for all these online courses that everybody keeps throwing at us, and I'm glad we didn't, because most of them have been a waste anyhow. So we just said, all right, we're two smart, upwardly mobile individuals that have good generational knowledge about agriculture. Let's figure it out. And we just did. But my motivation truly is, there are too many barriers of entry into agriculture for young people. I am many multi-generational farms, but I'm really starting over. I'm 3 years into this journey, and I was only 6 years into the journey before that. So I am that new startup guy, and I can see all these barriers of entry. And so I'm going, okay, how do we overcome them? And the barriers of entry are, first off, how do you tell consumers you're there? And how do you get them to be aware? And then how do you build a customer base? And so I'm learning all that stuff, from the get-go with no other knowledge. And I hope that it can be, I hope that I'm successful. The jury is still out on that. We really haven't turned a serious profit yet. We're struggling. This summer has been really tough with just the general economy and the movement of people and vacations, and our inability to match production to what people demand. And so it's been another learning year from that. But I hope that we can be successful, so that we can just come along some people and say, here are some pitfalls to avoid, but here is the end, the glory at the end of this, and how can you get through it? Because everything in agriculture now is, if you want to win, you got to get this big, you've got to be signed up for this many government programs, you've got a model you've got to fit into. And I want to be the guy that goes out there and says, throw that model out. That model is useless. It's obsolete. Here's how you get to be important to your community, how you can have a small farm be profitable, not kill yourself, and enjoy green grass and the cow that's eating it, and enjoy having that customer come to your farm, and enjoy the like today, we delivered the milk this morning, and she's an elderly woman, late 70s, who comes and picks up 3 half-gallon jars just about every week, unless she's gone. And her name is Connie, and she's got some physical limitations now with her age. And I was talking to another customer, and normally I just load everything in her car for her, but she got out and she got her stuff around and brought me her empty jars, and we did our exchange. And she, short little gray-haired lady, she just grabs my arm and she says, I just want to tell you how much I thank you for your milk. And she says, and she says, my little granddaughter has been drinking your milk. And she says, I don't know what it means, but she just keeps saying to me, your milk is fire, your milk is fire. I says, I do know what that means. She said, it's something called an emoji. I go, yeah, I get it. I know exactly what we're talking about. And you will never get that in 1,000 years, going to the dairy co-op and getting the, hey, you got the lowest somatic cell count this year, or whatever. That lady and that little granddaughter is dependent upon my milk. And that little girl, 2 years ago, she couldn't drink milk. and now she can drink our milk, you know? And it's like,
Can't beat that.
can't beat that. That's, and you can't put that in a model.
Nope.
And nobody else can profit off of that, because I'm selling my milk to her for $8 for a half a gallon, and there's no middleman in between there. She knows me, I know her. It's peer to peer. It's pure. It's complete capitalism, and then at the same time, it fulfilled her need. And what I have learned in the last 6 months is, what it really comes down to is, in the direct to consumer, is you have to fill a need. The problem that we have is, right now, we also have to tell our consumers what they need, because they don't understand that that food is medicine, and that you can eliminate all these health issues if you just have good food. And so stop spending, $400 a month on prescription, and increase your food budget by $300. You'll feel better. Your kids will behave better. All these external benefits and extra benefits that you can't imagine, but you have to put a little work into it. You can't just get it, automatic subscription filled and delivered to your house the minute you want. You have to put a little thought into it. You have to store it. It's live. It's living food. We've started selling flour. Just as a really new addition, just in the last 2 weeks that we've started doing this, and we're running to catch up to that. But we grew red turkey wheat this year. It's a heritage wheat. And I had not studied bread, and I had studied flour. My wife has been studying that. She's here about a week and a half ago. She was trying to make some bread with this flour, because it handles differently than store-bought and bleached flour. Fresh stone ground. We have our own mill, and all those things. And she's like, it's not doing this right, and it's not doing that right. And I said, wait a second. Let's look at this differently. What if this is the way bread should be, and the way that bread acts now is wrong? And she says, okay, I'll investigate that. And she starts looking at what gluten is. I had no idea what gluten was, but it's the combination of things with, it's not natural to the wheat. It's the expressed, I don't know enough about it yet to be an authority on it, but it's kind of that expressed reaction from the yeast and the water and the flour, and when they come together. And this stuff doesn't act like the other, like bleached flour. It's because it has less gluten in it, but it's higher protein, more bran, more energy. And I was like, so we even changed our bread so that people can eat their bread? And my daughter has had celiac disease since she was a little child, so she's not gluten intolerant, but she's gluten sensitive. She can eat our bread all day long. And here I am going like, she lived in our house for all these years. We could have grown our own wheat. I didn't know that. We spent money at doctors. No doctor ever told us any of this stuff. And so it's getting those consumers, and it's just a blessing to me that you cannot put the monetary value on that says, that's worth X on your balance sheet. Because little Connie, she tells everybody about our milk. We've gotten several customers through her, can't ever put a value on that.
Whenever you're starting out with the raw milk too, how did you market that then? Because on just food as medicine, a lot of people are telling us raw milk will kill us. And so clearly to a lot of people, raw milk is poison.
Right. So we did the typical Facebook page, join the different marketing groups, and that's probably 70% of our marketing. We rapidly found out about Weston A. Price. Again, so as a former commodity producer, all of those organizations, Weston A. Price, Bobby Kennedy Jr., all those, they were the enemy for me. And now I'm like their biggest supporter. So I have undergone this huge transition. While I was always kind of skeptical of using pesticides and had limited use of antibiotics and was very careful about all that stuff, I was never like I never abandoned any of, I was like, it's science and technology, I'll use it where I can. So I just made this, I have transformed. I have been born again as a dairy farmer from where I was to where I am now. And so we got on the social media sites. I started reading all I could, got a hold of all this different information, found a way to incorporate some of that into our own lives, and then just got really bold when people would push back about stuff, and especially other dairy organizations that were that are truly hostile to raw milk. I always bring this up. All of our laws that govern dairy, their basic foundational statute is the Pasteurized Milk Marketing Ordinance of 1927. So 1927 was the year that they required milk to be pasteurized. And I say, okay, why did they require that? And everybody says, because people were getting sick from drinking raw milk. And I said, no, read what was going on at the time. Do a little digging in history. The processors were making swill milk and all of this nasty stuff, and it was getting commingled. All the milk was getting commingled, stuck on unrefrigerated trains, and hauled around in New York State primarily was where the big issue was.
Yep.
And then they would add things to it, just to even keep it looking white, from plaster to, all different kinds of things. And I said, so they did not do that because of raw milk from a cow. They did that because of improper handling from a processor.
Yep.
So understand, first and foremost, milk was never the issue. It was the handling and distribution that was regulated.
That's why I love the saying, it's not the cow, it's the how. Because that phrase has always been said about beef cattle, but with dairy even more so too.
Yeah.
Because this is what infuriates me the most is a lot of people think that in its natural form as raw milk is bad. No matter what the cow is, because it's raw, it's bad and dangerous, but that's not true whatsoever.
Right.
Because if that was the case, and we've been drinking raw milk for thousands of years, you would see in all these ancient texts and ancient history, because people did document in caves, whatever, would show that.
Right.
That doesn't say that anywhere. The only time that ever started happening was the Industrial Revolution and whenever like you said, New York City, and then the infant mortality and all these. At that time, I would not be drinking that either.
Right.
It's just, let's use some common sense, but because it's so polarized, so emotional driven, and because most people are so disconnected from our food, they're like, oh yeah, of course. And then,
but then,
I could just rant on that for hours because it's so infuriating. Because now I've spent time on looking at New York Times articles. Because that's all there too. That's another thing. Trust the science, or I read the science and I read the history too. There was an article from where someone got their milk delivered and the bucket had a lizard in it. And so of course you're not going to be drinking that either.
Right.
But all of the context is always missing. Always.
But here's the other thing then. So the milk in 1927, what didn't we have in most of America in 1927?
Electricity, refrigeration.
Electricity and refrigeration. So, okay, trust the science and accept the technology, but don't put them together when they could be used to debunk a regulation. And bulk tanks, where milk can be stored and cooled in stainless steel, easily cleaned bulk tanks, weren't commonplace until the early 50s in the United States. We still had cans, and most people were still water bath cooling those cans. So you have an ordinance that wasn't even 30 years later, didn't account for the technological advancements. And now we're coming up on the 100-year anniversary of it, and nobody will look at that and say, maybe we should trust our own science. Maybe we should trust our technology. Maybe we have running water. We have water heaters. One of the biggest things they didn't have until electricity came along was readily available hot water.
I mean, the one thing that's talked about the most right now is AI. We literally have AI. What are we doing here, people? Like,
So we took that, and so I bring that information out to people. younger people readily accept that. The boomer generation, I cannot get it through. I knew a kid who died from, and you're like, are you sure? Well, it was 1957, and I think that's what happened. And, his parents didn't have any money. And it's like, well, it could have been, a million and one things, but they blame it on the rumor that it was raw milk.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going like, we have got to be willing to get beyond that stuff, and especially in the dairy industry, the traditional dairy industry, they have got to get to where they are willing to accept the new technology.
I don't think they're going to, because that just goes against their dollar.
Exactly. So then it's not about safety.
No.
It's about profit.
It's why I've always, from the very beginning with raw milk, because I started the Raw is Law tagline, and it's crazy to see people use it all the time online. The whole reason why I've been so focused on that, it's not about raw milk in itself. It's about self-sovereignty. It's about freedom.
Yes.
We deserve the right to choose between raw and pasteurized milk. But then also, that breaks up the monopoly of it all.
Yeah.
And that's why they fear it. That's why there's so much... I always type in raw milk news pretty much every single day. And anytime there's an outbreak, there's gazillion articles. And then I typically go and find the actual news, and it's not the actual truth that's being shared.
Right.
So it's very hard for the consumer to try to actually learn. But then also, this is why I continually shout out, shake the hand that feeds you, because if you go to an actual raw dairy farm and see the operation and ask these questions and then try the milk and all of this, you realize how much you are lied to constantly from the powers that be, because they want to continue to control it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what we've done with our those types of things. But then also, I have put out feelers to like local chambers of commerce to speak at them, and church groups, and I've only had a few people take me up on that, because that's really not something they don't know anything about it.
Sure.
So recently I went to a local chamber of commerce, and I just changed it. And I said, instead of wanting to talk about raw milk, I says, I want to talk about how we can have more community supported agriculture. They're more open to that, because that's up their lane of community and, support. Using I have learned I got to use the language and the jargon of the people, not what I'm used to.
Right.
So I'm hoping to get into some of those places and just have that opportunity to get information out there, because if we don't tell the story, who's going to? And that's what's so neat about what you're doing, the stories that you're sharing. And that was one of the things that so upset me with what the co-op was trying to do to get their customers, their big processors, to be able to piggyback on our story. It's like, none of the people in that processing plant know anything about my farm, and yet you're attaching it to their label, and nothing could be further from the truth, because what I sold from here is nothing about what you're putting out on that consumer's table. So I have really taken that to heart, that we need to tell our own story, and it needs to be positive, it needs to be uplifting, and it needs to be consumer focused about how important it is for them to get on board with us, so that they have a resilient food supply, so that they know what's in their food, so that they understand their role in all of it. Because it comes back to, at the end, they have to have personal responsibility in this as well.
So it's 2025, and we're almost a year in, essentially, under the new presidency and the whole Maha regime. Do you feel like, with just the whole Maha thing as a culture now piece, has that had any positives, or have you seen any, I guess, the reaps of that benefit from the consumer standpoint of actually waking up to what Maha stands for?
The existing customers that we already had, we've had good discussions about that, and they are very excited about that, because they feel more mainstream in it. And then some of our newer customers that we've gotten in the last year it has emboldened them to take responsibility. And then you have a great chasm of people on the other side who just reject it all, and it hasn't had any impact on. So those who had kind of that they were kind of a fertile soil for that message, it has emboldened them, it has propped them up. For me as a producer, it has given me an ally that I can point to and say, not everybody in government thinks I'm crazy. And so, you know, there is this other way of thinking, and let's challenge the status quo. So I have been encouraged by it. I, of course, would be like everybody else. I wish more had been done, but I also understand that, you know, I'm the libertarian side of me on the political side says I want government as inefficient as possible. Except for right now, I'd like it to be a little more efficient. But you can't have both sides. You know, it's going to be what it's going to be. But the challenges that they have pushed back on, especially under Bobby Kennedy, I've been highly critical of a lot of things that Secretary Rollins has done. But I think in the last few weeks, she has started to make some more moves towards the direction I would like her to go.
Which direction?
I think she has two things. This goes back a little bit farther than just right now, but her support of the mods was extremely important, and I appreciated that she did that, and I got to give her all the credit in the world for doing that, because that is a sovereignty issue that can't be avoided. We have to have that. I think there's some more things she needs to do with that, but I like these first steps and understand that either side of the aisle, whoever was as Department of Ag, and I've paid attention to all of them since John Block in 1981, she's by far at least more willing than any of them to talk about the issues. So I think it's important that dialogue, what Charlie Kirk died for, is the goal that we all need to have. Constant, total dialogue. And so I appreciate that she's putting out those ideas. So the mod case is one. I think her rapid response, I think we could all see that she was forced by Big Ag to open up the border for the screwworm, and then she automatically shut it down, showing she was willing to listen to them. The old guard is still there, but then she was also willing to say, I'm not going to just listen to you only. And I really appreciated that she showed that decisive action about the screwworm. And then most recently here, where she started to talk about how we're going to look at the monopolization of the inputs, specifically talking about fertilizer, but to have that discussion, to just have that out there that, hey, we're going to start looking at some things, that's huge, because the old standard, the old guard knows now, oh, it's not just carte blanche. It's, you know, it's not free sailing. We're going to have to justify what we want. And I think she's going to continue to do that. So I have as much hope as I've ever had that government's going to make some changes. And I look at state issues, looking at like what North Dakota, with the representative up there, his name just skips my mind now, that young man who got raw milk going in North Dakota.
I know you're talking about. I wish I knew.
Yeah.
I think
I'd love to give him all the credit in the world for what he did there.
Yeah.
I see some other people who are coming up through the ranks that are making food sovereignty a bigger issue, and I am one who really wants to see states change more than the federal government, because I think that is a much more enduring standard, and it's one that we can have much more input into. I was recently asked, you know, not because of anything special, but I was asked to come to D.C. and talk about something, and I just can't go. I just can't get away from. I got to milk cows. With some of these organizations, I get a little frustrated with them because they're like, "We're out here to support the farmer, and we want you to come to D.C. and talk. Who's going to milk my cows? Who's going to feed my hogs? We don't know. Oh, and by the way, you have to pay your own way, you know,
Yep.
and it's several $1,000s, and then you got to hire somebody. Not that I appreciate everybody that can go and do that. It's just not something I can do right now. So
Right.
I'm like, but I can go down to Jeff City here in Missouri on a weekly basis, because it's a 2-hour drive for me to get there, and say, hey, I'm going to hold this representative. I'm going to talk to this committee member. So I would like to see us be more involved at the state level right now, get things changed at the state level, because that's going to have the most direct, especially if you're direct to consumer, that really impacts you.
Right.
Those state laws, in fact, right now we're in the midst of, we've got a changing of our attorney general. We've had 4 attorney generals that have been very lenient on raw milk laws. The new one that she hasn't been approved as far as I know, but that they're wanting to bring on, she is very public safety and health organization friendly. And that just gives me pause. I'm not saying that she'd do anything to raw milk, but it makes me think, she's listening to the health groups that are the institutional health groups, not the holistic health groups, and that may not bode well for us. So
there's a reason why I'm big on regenerative. I know regenerative agriculture is very polarizing to not just from consumers, but from producer side. The reason why to me is the future is you're not only building resilient soil, but a true regenerative agriculture, it's rebuilding the communities to where then you have resilient communities. So whenever stuff like that happens, you have those people that are ready to just go, to put the pressure on, to push back. Because clearly, as with the mods, it is slowly working. This is why I'm so focused on this. It does work, but it takes so much work and support from people, because you just described one singular talk to go to DC, how much it takes for you to do that.
Yeah.
Same with the lawyers. This is why farmers and ranchers are so constantly under attack, is because they can. They are, in a lot of ways, they're powerless.
Yeah.
But to me, rebuilding community rebuilds the resiliency of all.
Yes.
You're not just rebuilding soil, you're rebuilding communities and resilience as humans. And
yeah. And that's been the best part of this direct to consumer that we're doing. People come on the farm and a calf gets born and we put it on our Facebook page, and everybody just fawns over that and says nice things, and that to me is what agriculture should be. It shouldn't be, hey, I got just the National Corn Growers high yield for this year or whatever. Great. What are you going to do with it? I'm going to give it to an ethanol plant. Oh, okay. How's that help anybody here? Well, we built these ethanol plants, and now we got more jobs in rural communities. Well, all you did was displace farmers. Why didn't we have, instead of an ethanol plant, why don't we have an initiative to have 160 new farmers in this county, instead of 160 new jobs, which would be long-term more beneficial, and I don't know. I have, my journey has changed me and changed the way I look at things. And
what's been the most surprising aspect from this new change, if there is even one?
For me, in my personal, my view of soil, my view of my livestock, this field that's behind us, I pastured that most of the summer, and then we haven't gotten a lot of rain, so I haven't had cattle out here for a little while. I was out here moving the fence, in my daily moves, and I was looking at the ground, and I was seeing this grass grow here and that alfalfa plant there and that clover plant over there. And it just dawned on me how I had never taken the time before to really analyze the ground I was walking on. The thing that held my farm together, that my farm was built on, this foundational block. And I thought, I have never really given honor to this soil like I should have. And that was huge for me.
So now with that change, did you think you were a farmer beforehand?
Well, I hadn't thought about that.
Because that's my thing is, to me, because it does go to the soil. So to me, it's changed how the phrasing of farming. Because even just from my road travels driving around, when I was in North Carolina, there's just so many places of just horse farms. But to me, a lot of those are just tax write-offs for them.
Yeah.
But then have the farm. And so the phrase of farm to me has really gotten messy and muddled too.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm just curious from your perspective. on that?
Yeah. Well, what I would say was I was a farmer, and now I'm a caretaker, and now I am holistic. Now I am, because a farmer looks at this was. I know this isn't the historical definition, but this would be my definition today, and what has been the farmer for the last 70 years is extraction for yield. And now what I'm looking at is harmonizing for yield.
Yes.
And so I use the frame, in the Bible, God says man has dominion over the earth, and I go, He gave us dominion. He didn't allow us to become, not domination, where we were extracting. We're going to harvest. We're going to care for the soil. The soil is going to care for our cow. I'm going to care for the cow. I'm going to harvest the milk. I'm going to care for the milk, and then I'm going to care for my neighbor. And it's that caretaker all the way through to the final end person, and that shows the glory of each individual aspect. And I am this minuscule little part of it in the middle that just is kind of like the organizer, not the farmer of it.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay, we got this symbiotic thing and this symbiotic thing, and I'm going to get them all. I'm going to get them harmonized, and I'm just a conductor of the orchestra, but I am not the music. And that's how I look at it. But farming to me will now always be viewed in my mind as an extraction, as taking from. And it doesn't matter if it's taking from the soil, it doesn't matter if it's taking from the cattle, or it doesn't matter if it's taking from the taxpayer in the form of subsidy. And I didn't view myself as that before, but then after this I was like, everything I was doing was for the moment. And there was no building. There was no thinking about how can I build this grass and make it sustainable and make it so that this cow, the average life of a cow in the United States dairy herd right now is just under 4 years. I think it's 43 months. And I'm sitting here and I'm going, I want to see how long these cows live. And I want to understand, I'm not going to let them, live out their last few days in pain and, be
Right.
crippled. I will harvest the meat and do the thing that's necessary. But as long as they're having calves and can reproduce and produce milk, they're in the herd. The cow that calved this morning is 9 years old, and I had to give her a little bit of a help with delivering the calf, but that's not all that unusual. And she got up, licked off the calf, and is raising a great calf out there right now. Well, that's awesome. That's caretaking. I'm not
Animal husbandry.
I'm not trying to make her be, okay, she didn't meet this quota of production. She met this quota of caretaking, and she met this, she's going to be good at taking soil, sunlight, water, vegetation, making it into milk. Somebody once asked me, why do you believe in God? And I said, because I saw a black cow eat green grass and give white milk. How'd that just happen? All those colors, all those variations, all those unique things of bacteria, all this stuff that works behind there, come on, that just didn't happen.
Yeah.
And I just get excited. I'm more excited about that now than I ever have been. And now I'm just trying to figure out how to make money on it.
Yeah.
So excitement doesn't pay the bills.
No, but it keeps the vision and that alive to
Yep.
get to figure that out.
Yep.
And that's why I tell people all the time, shake the hand that feeds you. Because when you actually talk to a farmer and rancher and you actually listen to their stories, see all the work that it takes to actually produce food, it really can shift your perspective on life. But then also you start actually developing a relationship and understanding where your food comes from, and you have no idea where that snowballs to. So again, thank you so much, JR. This was great.
Hey, thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Sweet. Good. That was an awesome conversation. Visit www.theregenaissance.co to learn more.